Chapter 8:13. Passerby A 16th place. Passerby B 17th place. The other two unimportant characters from Yanjing City managed to get the 16th and 17th place, leaving only the first and second place in suspense. It would be either Fleeting Time Ling or Guhan who would get the first and second place. "I'm so nervous, I hope Miss Ling gets first place," the second-generation heir prayed in a low voice. In fact, the other cameramen around him were also praying. Most of the audience in Yanjing City were also praying. But in order to maintain suspense, the host didn't announce the final result for a long time, letting this kind of emotion ferment among the audience. "So you're also a liar?" Guhan's voice rang in Liunyan Ling's ears. "What did I lie to you about?" Liunyan Ling asked woodenly. "Do you remember the first time we met? You told me your results weren't up to standard and that you needed me to help you cheat. Have you forgotten?" Guhan's voice rang in Liunyan Ling's ears softly, like a green foxtail constantly teasing Liunyan Ling's ears, teasing Liunyan Ling's constantly trembling heart. "But now you got second place. The difficulty of this exam is more than 10 times that of the previous one. Are you lying to me?" Guhan said unhurriedly. "You also swindled something precious from me. Otherwise, what right do you have to talk to me now?" Liunyan Ling retorted bluntly. Guhan could only smile bitterly when he heard this. In fact, Guhan didn't have to tease Liunyan Ling at all, but for some reason, when he saw Liunyan Ling's eyes filled with hatred, Guhan's heart actually ached a little. This was also the reason why Guhan had draped his cloak over Fleeting Time Ling, who was wearing the same thin clothes as Fleeting Time Ling. It was also the reason why Guhan was trying to provoke Fleeting Time Ling. It was as if you suddenly pulled the hair of the girl sitting in front of you in class. Your original intention was not to tease her, you just wanted to attract her attention. However, the shy youthful you couldn't think of any other way to attract the other party's attention and obtain the opportunity to speak with the other party, even if it was your name. Doing so would only destroy your originally unimportant image in the other party's heart. The sword spirit of Sea Hall stood quietly on the VIP stand of the martial arena, scanning the sword bearers below the stage. He was holding a brand new notebook in his hand. Although this notebook had just been bought not too long ago, most of it had already been flipped through, and it was filled with densely packed record. Clearly, those famous sword-bearers who thought that everything would be fine after the destruction of the Black Notebook had miscalculated. The sword spirit of Sea Hall hadn't forgotten about them. There weren't many VIPs in the VIP stand today. In the past, the higher-ups of the sword-bearers were very interested in the Ba Academy tournament. They wanted to see if there was any powerful new blood in the various cities. They might even be able to see the shadow of a few future sword immortals and future Jiendi. This was especially true when the descendants of the Lun Yen clan appeared in the Ba Academy tournament. The VIP stand would be filled with people. However, it was different this time. Sword Immortal Tian Hen's matter had left all the higher-ups in Yanjing City in a terrible state. Moreover, Longshu Jiendi would also be arriving in Yanjing City the day after tomorrow to participate in the finals. Therefore, the higher-ups of Yanjing City simply didn't have the time to care about the previous few days' matches. They would most likely only accompany Longshu Jiendi on the last day of the finals. "Why do you have to do such an annoying thing?" a hoarse voice said faintly from behind the sword spirit of Sea Hall. "That's my job." The sword spirit of Sea Hall closed his black notebook and turned around. He saw Wu Zhangshi, who hadn't appeared in a long time, leaning against the wall and looking at him with a smile. Suddenly, Wu Zhangshi asked this question for no reason. "You should be here soon, right?" This question didn't have a subject. Actually, there was one. Predicate or object. It was simply an incomprehensible question. The sword spirit of Sea Hall seemed to know why Wu Zhangshi was asking this question. He nodded coldly and replied, "Soon. 2 years at most." "That's really fast. Our plan can be brought forward again." Wu Zhangshi smiled and walked to the sword spirit of Sea Hall's side. He looked at the thrones and the participants sitting on them. How is it? How many names did you add? There aren't many true talents. There are only 7, the sword spirit of Sea Hall answered. TSK. 7 is not a lot. You've included the most important talents in the 8 base cities in the next 10 years, or even 20 or 30 years. If one of the 7 dies, the chairman of the base cities will go after you. If all of them die, your father, Dragon Shi, will be forced to imprison you forever. Wu Zhangshi seemed to be reminding the sword spirit of Sea Hall, but at the same time, he seemed to be instigating the sword spirit of Sea Hall. He has his mission and I have my principles. There is no conflict. The sword spirit of Sea Hall remained indifferent. Never mind. It's none of my business. Right, I heard that you had a conflict with that young man sitting on the throne. If you think it's troublesome, do you need my help? Wu Zhangshi changed the topic to Gohan. It's not troublesome. We'll talk about it when he comes back alive from the Shanghai Pass. The sword spirit of Sea Hall might be saying that it was nothing, but Wu Zhangshi noticed that the sword spirit of Sea Hall was tensed up. It was evident that the sword spirit of Sea Hall was not as indifferent as he sounded. I have a history with that kid. He knelt in front of me and begged me to accept him as my student. At that time, I gave him a condition and even took a royal seed as a deposit. However, I didn't expect Lu Lei to interfere in the matter. Now that I think about it, it's such a pity. If I hadn't acted tough, Lu Lei wouldn't have accepted such a talented person as his student. If he could help me, the success rate of our business would be much higher, Wu Zhangshi said with pity. I don't know if he will accept my condition or not. Otherwise, I can break the rules and share an apprentice with Lu Lei. He won't be able to live past next year anyway. That apprentice will be mine alone. After saying that, a radiant expression appeared on Wuzhang Shifeng's face. It was very different from the cold and arrogant Wuzhang Shifeng that everyone else knew. What condition did you give him? The sword spirit of Sea Hall asked curiously with a stiff expression. First place in the ancient sword grade competition. Wu Zhangshi rubbed his chin. Then he changed it to first place in the treasured sword grade. Don't even think about it. He is now the first place in the famed sword grade. You won't have a chance. The sword spirit of Sea Hall left the VIP stand after he finished speaking. Only Wu Zhangshi was left standing there, deep in thought. Liu Nianling's total score is 985 points. After the audience's curiosity and suspense reached its peak, the host, who had been silent all this time, finally began to announce the final results. The first to be announced was Liu Nianling's score. She had scored 985 points, which was only 15 points away from 1,000 points. This was a terrifying score in this era where everyone was not good at exams. Done. This time we're safe. The cameraman with the clairaudience let out a long sigh of relief. The other cameramen immediately hugged each other and shouted excitedly. The audience in the stands also shouted excitedly and blew their whistles loudly. The audience in front of their televisions also banged their tables. Liu Nianling had scored a super high score of 985 points. This was an extremely high score that was extremely rare in history. This time, it's definitely done. The cameraman with the clairaudience said with certainty. There was only one person in history who scored higher than Liu Nianling. It was a senior from 300 years ago who scored 990 points and created a new record. However, after that year's exam questions were announced, it caused a lot of dissatisfaction. Many well-known teachers and scholars expressed that the exam questions were too easy. There weren't even moderately difficult questions like what the 3 representatives represent, let alone difficult questions like the 8 honors and 8 disgraces. So this time, Miss Linlin is very likely to create a real first place in the 8 Academies tournament. Miss Ling has already surpassed all her ancestors in this aspect, becoming the undisputed first in the Lionian family. I mean, the first person I'm talking about has even surpassed Master Kanzu. Master Kanzu also mentioned in his memoirs that he only scored 634 points in the college entrance exam, which is 361 points lower than Miss Ling's score. The cameraman's words made the audience nod in agreement. They felt that listening to him was better than reading books for 10 years. Unfortunately, no one, including the cameraman with the clairaudience, knew that the total score of the college entrance exam was only 750 points. Ranked second. But before the people of Yanjing City could finish their cheers, the host's next words sent them into the abyss. What was going on? That was impossible. How could Miss Ling only be in second place? How could she only be in second place when she was only 15 points away from 1,000 points? There must be something shady going on. The crowd wanted to roar like this, but they knew that it was impossible. Because the host was Yanjing City, all the teachers in charge of marking the papers were naturally from Yanjing City. So even if these teachers wanted to do something shady, they would not target their own people, not to mention that Liunian Ling had the Liunian family behind her. Just wait and see. That Gohan will at most score a few points higher, and the questions this time will definitely be very easy. There might not even be 3 questions that represent this level. The cameraman with the clairaudience said with certainty. First place, Gohan, total score, 1,860 points. Gohan's results were finally announced. Cough cough, I don't think I've ever said that the full score was 1,000 points. I definitely didn't say that. The full score was actually 3,000 points. Chapter 8:14. 1860 points. Just like that, the highest score in the history of the Octagon tournament was born. He had a gap of almost 900 points from the second place. This almost meant that such a high score would never be born again in the future. Although some of the top students might be able to get such a score, such top students were usually in their 20s or 30s. More importantly, they were not sword bearers. Even if there were a few rare top students who became sword bearers, it was impossible to become a treasure sword bearer within a year and obtain the minimum qualification to participate in the Octagon tournament. Therefore, unless a sword bearer who was even more talented than Gohan was born in the future, this record would probably be maintained for hundreds or even thousands of years. Whether it was the stands around the arena or in front of the TV, all the spectators were silent. They had already realized that they might have witnessed a record that would last for hundreds or even thousands of years. They should have jumped excitedly to celebrate the birth of this record, but when they remembered that this record was created by the Yuzhong guy and that he had even pushed the proud Liunian family of Yanjing City to second place, these spectators could not be happy at all. What? It's just an exam, not real strength. What's there to be proud of? These spectators could only comfort themselves like this to ease the unhappiness in their hearts. However, the way they looked at Gohan had changed. From the previous complete disdain to extreme caution, it was obvious that the people of Yanjing City had begun to look at this rising powerhouse in a new light, just like the people of Yuzhong City. Abdul Muhammad, ranked 23rd, Olaf, ranked 22nd, O'Neill, ranked 21st, Obama, ranked 20th, and George H.W. Bush, ranked 19th, please leave the arena. The host's indifferent voice rang through the entire martial arts arena. 3 contestants had already chosen positions that were not in line with them and ended up being eliminated. In addition, there was also Jules Vren, who had forfeited. Therefore, the last 5 contestants must all be eliminated at this time. Abdul Muhammad, who was originally in 6th place, had replaced his place with Ashima, so the contestant who was originally at the top of the rankings had no choice but to dejectedly leave the arena. The most unlucky ones were the Los Angeles Skeleton Brothers. These 3 unlucky kids did not even have the right to participate in the second round of the tournament. They were all eliminated. As a result, UCLA ended up in last place, which was 1 place lower than last year's result. The Sword Spirit, who was leading the team from UCLA, was so angry that his face was as black as charcoal. He left the arena without saying a word. However, the skeleton brothers did not seem that sad. Instead, they laughed and hugged each other's shoulders, ready to end their experience. However, when the three skeleton brothers were preparing to leave the martial arts practice field from the side door, a man dressed in black clothes blocked their way. "Hello, I am the Sword Spirit of Guay Hall," the Sword Spirit of Guay Hall said to the three skeleton brothers while holding a small book in his hand. Guhan has obtained 24 points, Jin Yujia has obtained 22 points, Harry Changrua has obtained 22 points, Ladia has obtained 18 points, Liunian Ling has obtained 18 points, Andreevich has obtained 18 points, Munich has obtained 18 points, Lubai has obtained 10 points, Ashima has obtained 10 points, Abdullah has obtained 10 points, Beckham has obtained 10 points, Bear Grylls has obtained 10 points, Passerby A has obtained 10 points, Passerby B has obtained 10 points, and Leslie Dracula has obtained 10 points. The host announced the scores of the contestants according to the results of the first round. The points were based on different levels. Guhan, who sat on the first level, had obtained 24 points. The person on the second level had obtained 22 points, the person on the third level had obtained 18 points, and the person on the fourth level had obtained 10 points. However, some people might find it strange. Liunian Ling had obtained the second place overall, so naturally, she should have obtained 23 points. Why didn't Zhao, who was in the fourth place, obtain 20 points? This was related to the order that Liunian Ling had chosen at the beginning. According to the rules of the organizing committee, after each round, the order would be filled up according to the original order. In other words, the order would be filled according to the original order, and then the order would be filled according to the result. For example, after Leslie Dracula's position on the second level was vacated, the contestant with the best result on the third level would be chosen. In other words, Harry Changrua would be placed on the second level instead of Liunian Ling, who was in the second place but sat on the fourth level. Of course, since Liunian Ling had the best result on the fourth level, Liunian Ling would be placed on the third level first. That was the general rule. If one still didn't understand it, then there was no need to think about it. The remaining contestants on the thrones ascended according to the order of their ranking, and the first 4 levels were all filled up. The vacated 5th level was quickly cleaned up by the staff, leaving only the empty steps there, as if narrating the unwillingness of all the contestants. Among the remaining contestants, Leslie Dracula was probably the most unwilling. This proud little girl had never expected that after the first round of the competition, she would be the only contestant left in the whole of Buenos Aires. Moreover, she was in the last place among the remaining 15 contestants of Bright Moon. She was already on the verge of being eliminated in the next round. This situation was simply terrible. Of course, if Leslie Dracula was a little more open-minded, she would be very happy to find that at least her 7th place was secured. Compared with last year's result, she had improved by 1 place. Anyway, it was still an improvement. From the 2nd place to the 1st place, it was only 1 place. Yuzhang University's total score is 46 points, Berlin College's total score is 46 points, London College's total score is 42 points, Yenjing College's total score is 38 points, Jerusalem College's total score is 20 points, Moscow College's total score is 18 points, Buenos Aires College's total score is 10 points. The host then reported the total score of each college. After 5 rounds of competition, the college with the highest total score would be awarded the honor of first place in the 8 Academy tournament. Originally, in the eyes of the people of Yenjing City, Yenjing College's total score should have been the first place. However, they didn't expect Guhan, the Yuzhang guy, to suddenly interfere, causing Liunian Ling, who originally had an unparalleled score, to only get 18 points, placing her in the 4th place overall. And damn, Yuzhang University and Berlin College were tied for first place. Even a college like London College could be ranked 3rd. It was really too unfair for them to be above Yanjing College. Of course, most of the audience didn't think that even if Liu Ling got first place, her total score would only be 44 points. She was still 2 points behind Berlin College, and could only be ranked second. Don't worry, this is only the first round. Yanjing College will catch up very soon. It's no big deal. The clairaudient cameraman comforted the people around him. The people around him also nodded with grief and indignation. Our Yanjing College just made a mistake. We will definitely be able to catch up later. The second round is the ranking challenge. Every contestant has the right to issue a challenge. If you issue a challenge to an opponent with a higher ranking than you, if you win, the higher ranking contestant will be eliminated. At the same time, you will have the opponent's ranking. If you lose, your ranking will not change, and you will not be eliminated. If you issue a challenge to an expert who is lower or equal to your ranking, if you win, your ranking will not change, and you will not be eliminated. If you lose, the opponent will have your ranking and you will be eliminated. If 8 people are not eliminated after one round, then the contestants on the 4th floor will be eliminated individually. Once the number of eliminated people reaches 8, the second round of the competition will end. The eliminated contestants can also exchange seats with other contestants from the same college and remain in the ranking throne. Challenges will be initiated by the contestants on the 4th floor. The host explained the rules of the second round of the competition clearly, and then the second round of the competition officially began. Leslie Dracula, please start your ranking challenge. The host continued. Unexpectedly, the first to issue a challenge was actually Leslie Dracula. However, because she had exchanged seats with Bush, who was originally ranked 18th, she was naturally ranked last after Bush was eliminated. Naturally, she was the first to issue a challenge. Leslie Dracula looked at the 14 contestants behind her and fell into deep thought. She suddenly didn't know who she should challenge. According to the method of elimination, the first person to be eliminated was Liu Ling. Leslie Dracula had once fought with Liu Ling when she was traveling in Buenos Aires. At that time, both of them were under 18 years old, and neither of them was a sword wielder. Just based on the ancient martial arts that they used, Leslie Dracula clearly realized the gap between her and Liu Ling, not to mention that Liu Ling had a super sword art like the billion sword spell. The second person to be eliminated was Andreevich. Leslie Dracula had seen Andreevich's fighting video. Andreevich's fighting style naturally restrained her. Although Leslie Dracula didn't think that she was weaker than Andreevich, he was only on the 3rd floor. There was no need to take the risk to challenge such a guy. In fact, Leslie Dracula told herself that she should challenge Gohan. However, when she was about to say Gohan's name, she inexplicably hesitated from the bottom of her heart. It seemed that she didn't want to see Gohan be eliminated. Forget it. I'll be safer and challenge another contestant from Yuzhong City. Therefore, Leslie Dracula set her eyes on Jin Yujia. I want to challenge Jin Yujia from Yuzhong University, Leslie Dracula said loudly. Chapter 8:15. Jin Yujia was shocked when she heard that she was being challenged. She immediately turned her head to look at Gohan, as if she wanted to get an answer from Gohan. Whatever. Just do your best, Gohan said calmly. Jin Yujia was only a sword wielder of the treasure sword rank. Gohan could only play a small trick in the first round. Keeping her in second place for one round was already his limit. It was simply impossible to replicate the success of the first round. Famous sword rank sword wielder Leslie Dracula challenges treasure sword rank sword wielder Jin Yujia. Because the highest battle strength of both parties is at the treasure sword rank, only sword ladies of the treasure sword rank and sword ladies of the ancient sword rank are allowed to battle. The host continued to announce. This was also to make up for the disadvantage of sword wielder with a lower cultivation. Otherwise, using a famous sword lady to duel with a treasure sword lady would be too much of a bully. I am Leslie Dracula of the famous sword rank. I am using the Obsidian Sword Lady of the Treasure Sword rank. After the battle with you, the grudge between us will be settled. We will use our lives to brighten the prosperity of mankind and not let down the future generations. I am Jin Yujia of the Treasure Sword rank. I am using the Clear Wind Sword of the Treasure Sword rank. After the battle with you, the grudge between us will be settled. We will use our lives to brighten the prosperity of mankind and not let down the future generations. After the standard opening remarks of the duel, the first challenge of the second round officially began. Well, in fact, there was nothing much to say about this match. Although Jin Yujia was also one of the best sword bearers in this year's Yuzhang Academy, her Qingfeng sword was ranked 87th in the Treasure Sword record, which was a few ranks higher than Leslie Dracula's Obsidian sword. Because she had the resources from the Dracula family, her Obsidian sword had already completed all 9 sword scars, allowing her to use her ultimate skill. On the other hand, the Qingfeng sword was not so lucky. Before Jin Yujia became a sword wielder, she was just a child from an ordinary family. Although with the help of Yuzhang University's resources, the Clear Wind Sword's mark had been deepened to the 3rd grade, the difference between a single ultimate move and a sword lady's was huge. A sword lady with an ultimate move and a ship lady without an ultimate move were completely different. If not for Gohan's amazing swordsmanship, it would have been very difficult to turn the tables. Moreover, Leslie Dracula was a famous sword wielder, and the amount of sword essence in her body was far greater than Jin Yujia's. This was a duel that had already been decided since the beginning of the competition. Although the Dracula family was a family with a long history, there didn't seem to be a person like the sword master in the history of the Dracula family. Leslie Dracula naturally couldn't fight with her obsidian sword like the sword master. On the other hand, Jin Yujia was a child from an ordinary family, so it was even more impossible for her to be a swordmaster. Therefore, this duel was only a duel between 2 sword ladies. After the battle officially began, Jin Yujia displayed her excellent leadership skills. Under her command, Lady Clearwind used quite a few unexpected tactics. Her skills were also released at just the right time. Unfortunately, the difference in strength between the two was too great. The Obsidian Lady relied on her absolute advantage in attack and shield to defeat the Qingfeng Lady. During the entire process, the Qingfeng Lady didn't even use her skills a few times. Leslie Dracula still perfectly concealed her abilities. Just wait to be defeated by Big Sister Ling. Leslie Dracula, who had returned to the 2nd floor, waved her fists at Gohan. Gohan didn't respond at all. This heartless girl. Did she forget the benefits Gohan gave her last night? The second person to challenge was Passerby B from Yanjing City. This nameless passerby stood up angrily. He turned around and was about to point at Gohan's head and issue a challenge to Gohan. However, before he could speak, he was interrupted by a cold voice. Don't challenge him. Even 10 of you won't be a match for him. The one who spoke was naturally Liu Ling, who had a deep understanding of Gohan's strength. Liu Ling clearly knew that in the entire throne, she was the only one who could fight Gohan. Apart from her, the others who dared to challenge Gohan were all wasting their time. Miss Ling, don't be fooled by him. I don't believe he is a match for my rainbow sword, Passerby B said proudly. He didn't expect this passerby's sword mistress to be the rainbow sword. This sword mistress, ranked 37th in the famous sword mistress, looked very powerful. Liu Ling snorted coldly and didn't speak anymore. Anyway, people who challenged people who ranked higher would not be forcibly eliminated. It was just a pity that they would lose a chance to enter the next floor. I want to challenge the contestant from Yuzhang University, Gohan. Passerby B announced his decision loudly and proudly, which caused a burst of enthusiastic cheers from the onlookers. They shouted in unison, "Come on, Passerby B! Drive all these incompetent Yuzhang people back to Yuzhang City!" Hearing the crowd cheering for him, Passerby B's fighting spirit was even more exuberant. He pulled out his rainbow sword and pointed the tip of the sword at the tip of Gohan's nose. Despicable villain, do you dare to fight me? Since someone was seeking death, Gohan could only fulfill his wish. I am a famous sword mistress sword wielder Gohan. I use the sword mistress sword wielder, the Juzi sword. I am a famous sword mistress sword wielder passerby B. I use the sword mistress sword wielder, the rainbow sword. After saying the fixed opening lines, the competition began. In the end, Gohan chose the Juzi sword as his famous sword mistress sword. This also meant that Gohan could only use the Juzi sword to compete in public. Otherwise, if others knew that Gohan had a Chidien sword, it wouldn't be fun anymore. But after thinking about it carefully, the Juzi sword and the Chidien sword were exactly the same, just a little different in color. If there was really no other way, he could use the Chidien sword to fight. He just needed to think of a way to fool the problem of the color. After 3 minutes, the exciting competition that made the people of Yanjing City shout excitedly for Yuzhong people to go back to Yuzhong City came to an end. Passerby B sat on the ground with a face full of dirt. An expressionless Juzi stood in front of him, and Sword Mistress Qinghong's personal shield had been shattered. In fact, Gohan didn't appear as the Sword Master during the entire battle. Instead, he handed the entire battle to Juzi, who was the Sword Mistress, and let her use her own body to fight. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken 3 minutes. Perhaps 20 seconds would have been enough. And in this battle, Juzi had fully displayed her strength as a sword mistress. Even if Gohan wasn't the sword master, Juzi could still easily win with her own strength. In fact, as the opponent of the rainbow sword, the Juzi sword still had a huge weakness. That was that Juzi didn't have a deep sword mark. She was still a 9th grade sword mistress, and could only use her basic skills. And the effect of the Juzi sword's basic skill, the ancestor of the demon, was to rely on every demonic sword mistress around her to increase all her attributes by a different ratio for a certain period of time. And the opponent of the Juzi sword, the rainbow sword, was a genuine martial sword mistress. This way, the Juzi sword's basic skills were not much different and had no effect at all. On the other hand, the Cyan rainbow sword, with the help of the rich and overbearing Yanjing Academy, had already reached the 3rd level. It had activated 3 skills other than its ultimate move. In terms of skills, it completely crushed the orange sword, just like how the obsidian sword had crushed the clear wind sword. However, Juzi still won cleanly. This was because Juzi's swordsmanship was superior to the green rainbow sword. It had to be known that Sword Mistress Qinghong wasn't some weak sword mistress. The rainbow sword and the heavenly sword were originally the swords of the ambitious and ruthless Cao Cao. Later on, the rainbow sword fell into the hands of the white horse war god Zhao Yun and became his divine weapon. So Sword Mistress Qinghong's swordsmanship could be said to be a combination of the martial arts of Cao Cao and Zhao Yun. Her swordsmanship was one of the best among the famed sword mistresses. If there was a ranking of swordsmanship, she could be ranked in the top 10. But even with this kind of swordsmanship, the rainbow sword was still crushed by Juzi's sword. In that 3-minute battle, the rainbow sword displayed countless exquisite sword moves and unimaginable swordsmanship to the spectators. Normal sword mistresses would not be able to withstand such swordsmanship a long time ago. Juzi was like a robot in the face of such swordsmanship. Every stroke of her sword was very mechanical, as if it had been programmed in advance. It was fixed and stiff, and there was no sign of life in it. Logically speaking, this kind of swordsmanship should be nothing more than dust in the eyes of a true swordsman. However, every time Juzi attacked, he just happened to hit the weak points of Goddess Qinghong's swordsmanship. Not only did he render Goddess Qinghong's attacks useless, but he also took advantage of the gaps in her swordsmanship to launch attack after attack. Because he couldn't use any skills, each of Juzi's attacks were only basic attacks. He relied on these basic attacks, which did not have any bonuses, to forcibly destroy Goddess Qinghong's personal shield. Goodbye. Juzi sheathed his sword and prepared to return to Gohan's side. "Wait!" Goddess Qinghong, who hadn't said a single word, suddenly called out to Juzi. "Why? How can your clumsy and mechanical swordsmanship defeat me? Why do you seem to be able to see through each of my attacks?" Goddess Qinghong, who had lost the match, asked in confusion. It wasn't that she was unwilling to accept her loss. She just couldn't understand why she had lost. Juzi stopped moving. After staring blankly for a moment, he replied, "Swordsmanship is only about offense and defense. The offense and defense are unclear, so the momentum is lost." Chapter 8:16. Perhaps it was because those who challenged higher levels would not be eliminated, so after Passerby B was defeated, Passerby A still chose to challenge Gohan. The result was naturally tragic. Passerby A was no match for Juzi at all. She lasted 1 minute longer than Lady Qinghong and lost. Next was London College's Beckham and Bear Grylls. Passerby A and B had fully demonstrated Gohan's strength, so they did not choose to challenge Gohan. Instead, they chose to challenge Berlin College's Munich, who was sitting on the 3rd floor. This was because this was the only opponent they could defeat. Other than Munich, the opponents on the 3rd level and above were all famed sword-level sword bearers. This was a challenge that Beckham and Bear Grylls, who were treasured sword-level sword bearers, could not challenge. However, they never expected Munich to be so strong. These two people challenged Munich one after another and both failed. Munich also firmly defended their position. Munich's Blademaster was a martial arts Blademaster with strong physical strength. She charged forward like a chariot and forcibly defeated Beckham and Bear Grylls. However, when faced with Abdullah's challenge, Munich finally lost. Abdullah's Blademaster was actually a very rare mind control skill. Blademasters with strong physical bodies would more or less have some mental weakness. Once their minds were controlled by the opposing Blademaster, defeat was inevitable. As a result, Abdullah kicked Munich out of the 3rd level, and he took a step forward and was now in 3rd place. After Abdullah, it was the Saintess Ashima's turn. She was also the 2nd ace contestant of the Elite 8 Academies tournament, a famed swordsman. At this time, the contestants sitting on the first 3 floors were all famed swordsmen, except for Abdullah. Ashima naturally would not challenge Abdullah from her own college, so the next battle would definitely be a battle between famed swordsmen. Thinking of this, all the spectators began to get excited. In the past 8 Academies tournament, it was rare to see a battle between famed swordsmen. This was because there was usually only one famous sword-bearer in the 8 Academies tournament. Sometimes there were even only sword-bearers in the tournament. But when there were 2 sword-bearers in the 8 Academies tournament, these 2 sword-bearers would have a tacit understanding to eliminate the sword-bearers from the other cities' academies first. Finally, they would compete with each other in the finals. It was not like today, where they could see a battle between famed swordsmen in just the 2nd round. No one could clearly see Ashima's expression under the veil, but it was obvious that she was hesitating. Ashima could challenge Gohan, Leslie Dracula, Haley Chong Ra, Ladia, and Liunyan Ling. Liunyan Ling was naturally the first to be ruled out, as Ashima did not have any intention of looking for trouble. 2 months ago, Ashima had already fought with Gohan. At that time, both of them were treasured swordsmen, and it ended with Gohan's victory. However, at this time, both of them had advanced to famed swordsmen, and no one knew who would win and who would lose, or who would be stronger. However, Ashima's gaze had never been on Gohan. Her gaze had always been hesitant on Ladia and Haley Chong Rua. This was because these two seemed to be the weakest of all the opponents. "I want to challenge London's contestant, Haley Chong Rua." Ashima finally made her decision. She chose to challenge London's Haley Chong Rua. This was the most standard choice. Ladia was somewhat famous, but Haley Chong Rua did not have any fame before the tournament. It was as if this person had appeared out of thin air. There were 2 reasons for this result. The first was that Haley Chong-Rua deliberately hid himself, and the second was that Haley Chong-Rua was just lucky. He happened to be born with a high level of swordsmanship, and he also met a famed sword mistress who could synchronize with him. No matter which reason it was, it showed that Haley Chong-Rua was not confident in himself, and this was the kind of person Ashima hated. Sigh. Haley Chong-Rua smiled bitterly and sighed. He supported his small body and stood up. At this time, a small breeze blew past, causing Haley Chong-Rua's robe to flutter continuously. At the same time, it also set off Haley Chong-Rua's body. Under the robe, Haley Chong-Rua's body was much thinner, like a malnourished child. Greetings, noble lady. On the arena, Haley Chong-Rua did not forget the etiquette that a British gentleman should have. He took off his hat and placed it in front of his chest. He bowed slightly to Ashima and greeted her. Under the robe, Ashima's response was very direct. She pulled out a long sword engraved with complex patterns from the scabbard on her back and pointed the tip of the sword at Haley Chong-Rua's chest. I am a famed sword mistress, Ashima Muhammad. I use the sword of the Prophet, a famed sword mistress of the famed sword mistress level. After this battle with you, all gratitude and resentment will be settled. With our lives, we will shine on the prosperity of mankind and not let down the future generations. As the saintess of the Green Sect, if Ashima wanted to become a famed sword mistress level sword mistress, she could only synchronize with a set of swords of faith that represented the divine power of Allah. I don't know if everyone still remembers this set of sword mistress level, but Gohan once had a hard battle with the sword of the future generation. At that time, Gohan faced the Heaven Reliance 1 month later, which was the Heaven Reliance after the invasion of Yuzhong City. Now that he thought about it, the sword essence in Gohan's body a month later was about 20,000 quarks. At that time, Gohan only had about 6,000 quarks. It was an extremely difficult battle, and even the Heaven Reliance was stunned. Now that Ashima had become a famed sword mistress level, the sword of the Prophet that she used was naturally changed. This was a sword mistress that was even more terrifying than the sword of the future generation. I am a famed sword mistress level Harry Chong-Rua. The sword mistress I use is the famed sword mistress level Gryffindor sword. This was the first time Haley Chong-Rua revealed his famed sword mistress level. His famed sword mistress level was actually the demonic sword mistress Gryffindor sword that rarely appeared. Gryffindor sword was the same as the heavenly sword. They were both sword mistresses that would hibernate for hundreds of years and hated to appear. It had been 700 years since Gryffindor sword had first appeared, and in these 700 years, Gryffindor sword had only been synchronized 3 times. This was the 4th time Gryffindor sword had appeared. Gryffindor sword was not ranked very high among the famed sword mistresses, being in the 20s. However, her battle style was very unique, and was completely different from most sword mistresses. As for how unique it would be known from the next battle. Is it another boring Great 8 Academies assembly? Gryffindor sword blurted out this sentence the moment she was liberated, and it made the audience feel extremely awkward. After the awkwardness, people started to get curious. Had Gryffindor sword participated in the Great 8 Academies assembly before? Hence, people started to search for information, and they were shocked to find that Gryffindor sword had participated in the Great 8 Academies assembly 3 times before. Gryffindor sword had only appeared 3 times before, which meant that she had participated in the Great 8 Academies assembly every time she appeared. If Gryffindor sword wanted to participate in the Great 8 Academies assembly, she had to let her swordsman become a famed swordsman within a year. How many swordsmen could there be in the world? It was almost impossible to encounter such a situation by natural luck. This meant that this was the result of Gryffindor sword's deliberate selection. Thinking of this, the audience seemed to understand why Gryffindor sword had appeared so few times. When she chose her swordsmen, she would only choose those geniuses who had 10,000 quarks of sword elements within a year. That was why she had appeared so few times. The prophet will foretell your death. At the same time, the prophet's sword had also completed its liberation. It turned into a young girl in a green robe with a green scarf wrapped around her head. The young girl's expression was sacred and solemn, just like a noble deity from heaven. When the young girl appeared, Abdullah, who was also a swordsman of the Jerusalem Academy, suddenly knelt down and buried his head deep into the ground. He did not dare to take another look at the battlefield. To be precise, he did not dare to look at the young girl called the prophet. This was the common problem of every swordsman of Jerusalem. They were extremely ignorant of their deity. Even in the midst of a battle, they would deliberately stop to pray. Some would even give up the battle because of some taboo. There were many such examples. Every once in a while there would be news like this. A swordsman of Jerusalem was fighting a tough battle. However, at a certain point in time, the swordsman who was clearly still fighting would suddenly kneel down and pray in the direction of Mecca. Then, there would be no then. There were many such stories. This was also the reason why the Jerusalem base city was hated by the other base cities. It was because they placed their deity above the swordsman. This was something that the other swordsmen could not accept. A city like Jerusalem should not exist. Seeing this scene, Gohan secretly clenched his fist. He saw that the noble swordsman was actually kneeling and praying to some inexplicable deity. This made Gohan sink into a kind of rage. Although he did not say anything on the surface, his face was livid. However, Gohan secretly told himself that once he had the power to change the entire human world, a base city like Jerusalem would have to change and return to the universal values of all swordsmen. Chapter 8:17. This time, let me, Gryffindor, take the 4th gold medal of the Great 8 Academies tournament. 10,000 bullets. Lady Gryffindor roared, and 10 fireballs suddenly condensed in the air around the Gryffindor's sword in her hand. The moment these fireballs condensed, they all shot out, and their target was the prophet's sword opposite her. The power of these 10 fireballs should not be underestimated. Anyone who knew Gryffindor's sword would know. Gryffindor's fighting style was very simple and fast. 10 huge fireballs flew over, and normally, Yuan Ko of the same level would be half crippled. As long as 10 more were added, the battle would basically be over. This was the power of Gryffindor as a diabolical swordmistress. Actually, rather than calling her a diabolical swordmistress, it would be more appropriate to call her a magical swordmistress. This was because Gryffindor's basic skill was called Gryffindor's Curse. This, Gryffindor's Curse, was not like most of the basic skills of swordmistresses, which only had one skill effect. The Gryffindor's Curse was actually a skill that combined many curses. To make a simple analogy, the basic skill of an ordinary swordmistress was like a seed file. However, the Gryffindor's Curse was a compressed file that compressed dozens of seed files into a compressed package. Although it seemed that both of them only occupied one icon, in fact, there were dozens of icons in the Gryffindor's Curse. 10,000 bullets was only one of the curses in the Gryffindor's Curse compressed file. Apart from that, the Gryffindor's Curse had many other curses that could achieve different effects. This was equivalent to Gryffindor's sword having dozens of skills compared to those ordinary swordmistresses that only had 4 skills. Hence, Gryffindor's sword had a nickname, Duobow Swordmistress. It did not mean that Gryffindor's sword had many treasures, but that she had many different skills. Everything is within the Lord's expectations. The moment the fireball was launched, the prophet casually took a step to the left, and then his body stopped moving. At the same time, the 10 fireballs had directly hit the prophet's body. Just when everyone thought that the prophet's body would explode, the fireballs flew straight past it as if the prophet's body did not exist. What exactly happened? Why did the fireball just fly over? The audience was surprised and had no idea what had just happened. Only master swordsmen like Gohan and Liunian Ling could see that the prophet was actually stuck between the gaps of the fireballs. The fireballs actually did not hit the prophet even once. This was just like a famous variety show from before the apocalypse called, "Here Comes the Wall." The contestants had to strike a specific pose and pass through a specially shaped hole in the middle of the wall. Otherwise, they would be dragged into the water by the wall. The reason why the prophet had to dodge was because the fireball was less than 10 centimeters away from the prophet's body. That was why the prophet's body wasn't hurt at all. This is the strength of the prophet goddess. The clairaudient cameraman sighed in admiration before explaining to the people around him. As the name suggests, the prophet goddess has the ability to foresee things. It was said that depending on the level of the wielder, they would be able to predict what would happen in the next 10 seconds to an hour. Just now, the prophet goddess must have predicted the trajectory of the 10 fireballs. Hence, she only took one step and dodged all the fireballs. Damn it! Gryffindor clenched his teeth and glared at the prophet opposite him. Earth spikes. Gryffindor only said 2 words, and the prophet goddess suddenly moved a few steps back. Then, more than 10 earth spikes protruded from the ground. If the prophet goddess had retreated a few tenths of a second later, she would have been pierced by these earth spikes. Amazing! She even predicted this. The audience did not understand, but the swordsman on the throne did. Just now, when Gryffindor had only used half of his skills and used his mental strength to lock onto the position of the control skill demonstration, the prophet goddess had already successfully predicted where Gryffindor's skills would be released. Seeing that his 2 waves of skills had failed, Gryffindor could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Don't think that he had only used 2 spells just now. In fact, these 2 spells were extremely powerful and had already consumed a lot of sword essence in Gryffindor's body. Don't think that she had only used 2 spells just now. In fact, the 2 spells were extremely powerful and had already consumed a lot of sword essence in Gryffindor's body. In contrast, the prophet goddess had only moved a few steps. She had only consumed a little bit of energy. From this moment on, the prophet goddess already had the upper hand. Let's see how you're going to dodge this. 10,000 bullets at once. The great god prophesied that pure water can erase dirty fire. Gryffindor waved his hand, and 100 fireballs appeared beside her in an instant. Then, these fireballs were all triggered in an instant, forming a dense net of bullet. Gryffindor's idea was simple. Can't you dodge? Then I'll weave a net for you that you can't dodge. However, someone really wanted to complain. You're already calling it 10,000 bullets at once, but why are there only 100 fireballs? Where's the promised 10,000 bullets? Objectively speaking, this was indeed a good idea. The prophet goddess's movement technique was not that great. She could not rely on her own movement speed to dodge the area covered by the bullet. Hence, the prophet goddess began to recite her god's prophecy at the same time that Gryffindor used 10,000 bullets at once. When Gryffindor's bullet fire net shot out, a clear stream of water flowed down from the prophet goddess's head and enveloped her entire body. Sizzle! It sounded like a red-hot piece of iron coming into contact with water, and then a burst of smoke came out. The fireballs that hit the prophet goddess's body were immediately extinguished by the water that poured down. Apart from making the prophet goddess's body wet, the true 10,000 bullets had no other effect. Damn it! This was the second time that Gryffindor had said the word damn it today. This meant that Gryffindor's heart had already fallen into extreme anxiety. No matter what kind of attack she launched, it was a terrible feeling to be predicted by the opponent. Come on, take another attack from me, 10,000 bullets, Gryffindor shouted indignantly. Then, she waved the Gryffindor sword in her hand, and 100 fireballs appeared around her again. Looking at it from afar, it gave off a scorching feeling. It would definitely not end well to be hit by such a fireball. The great god's prophecy. Pure water can wipe out dirty fire. At the same time, The water that had enveloped her appeared above the prophet goddess's head again. Ha 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 ha, you've been tricked. Gryffindor laughed happily. She snapped her fingers, and the 100 fireballs around her disappeared in an instant. These are just some simple illusions. What foretelling the future? It's just bullsh *t. God has seen through everything about you, the prophet goddess said with her head lowered. The water around her also disappeared in an instant. It turned out that it was just a simple illusion. You. Gryffindor's face instantly turned red. The prophet goddess's words just now were like the most vicious mockery that kept ringing in her ears. She felt like she was a monkey wearing a crown and had become the target to be toyed with. Heart of Gryffindor. Gryffindor raised the sword in her hand, and a wisp of smoke floated out of the Gryffindor sword. In the blink of an eye, the smoke transformed into a majestic golden-haired lion. Its sharp eyes stared at its opponent as if it was ready to launch a fatal blow at any moment. That was the ultimate skill of the Gryffindor sword. It could summon the soul of the golden sword lion contained in the Gryffindor sword and let the golden sword lion help it in battle. It was said that when the original owner of the Gryffindor sword was forging the Gryffindor sword, he killed a golden sword lion and then integrated the soul of the golden sword lion into it. Hence, the Gryffindor sword had the power to summon the golden sword lion. This could be seen from Yuan Ko, because there was indeed a magical beast called the golden sword lion in the camp of the Western magical beasts, and this magical beast was at the nether level Yuan Ko. As a nether level Yuan Ko, the golden sword lion naturally had its own unique characteristics, which were its attack speed and movement speed. The speed of the golden sword lion was said to be comparable to the speed of a celestial sword or universe-level Yuan Ko. Using such speed to deal with a famous sword-level swordmistress was naturally successful. Even if she could predict the next attack of the golden sword lion, there was no way she could dodge it. That was Gryffindor's plan. Almighty prophecy, my left hand is enough to resist the attack of the golden sword lion. Suddenly, the prophet's sword said. Then, the golden sword lion that was in an attacking state attacked at the same time. The prophet did not dodge, and allowed the teeth of the golden sword lion to land on her left wrist. Crack! With a loud sound, the golden sword lion took a few steps back in pain. There were a few teeth marks on the prophet's diamond-like arm. On the other hand, one of the sharp teeth of the golden sword lion was broken. My left calf is enough to resist the attack of the golden sword lion. It was another familiar scene. The prophet once again predicted the movement of the golden sword lion before it attacked. She turned her left calf into diamond and broke the second sharp tooth of the golden sword lion. Awoo! The golden sword lion let out a sorrowful cry. Then, its entire body turned back into green smoke and returned to Gryffindor's sword. As a nether level Yuan Ko that was one level higher than the famous sword level, it naturally could not be used by a famous sword-level swordmistress. The weakness of the golden sword lion was its teeth. These two teeth were not its real teeth, but were formed by borrowing the power of the sword essence. Every time it attacked, it would consume the sword essence of its teeth. Once the sword essence that formed the two teeth disappeared, the golden sword lion would disappear too. Chapter 8:18. Lady Gryffindor's forehead was already covered in sweat. Summoning the golden sword lion consumed a lot of her energy. It was equivalent to using half of the sword essence in her body on the golden sword lion. However, the golden sword lion died in less than 10 seconds. This undoubtedly dealt a huge blow to Gryffindor. The only thing that comforted Gryffindor was that the prophet's forehead was also covered in sweat. This meant that the prophet had also consumed a lot of sword essence in order to use the clairvoyance to protect her body. As one of the famous sword mistresses, the prophet's sword skills had long been known to the world. The prophet's sword's basic skill was prophecy, which could make her predictions come true 100% of the time. For example, if the prophet's sword predicted that it would rain, it would immediately rain instead of snow. That was why the prophet's sword could predict that there would be a stream of water protecting her, and that her body would turn into a hard diamond. However, such a prophecy was not unlimited. According to the actual situation, different prophecies required different sword essence of the quark. For example, predicting a stream of water to protect herself was a prophecy that consumed less energy. However, predicting that her body would turn into a diamond was a prophecy that consumed medium energy. In order to resist the pressure brought by the golden sword lion, the prophet's sword also consumed a lot of energy. However, relatively speaking, the prophet's sword's energy consumption was far less than Gryffindor's. After Lin Lee's ultimate move failed, Gryffindor had already lost. Next, the prophet's sword, who was passively defending, changed her tactics and took the initiative to attack. This put Gryffindor in a very passive position. Gryffindor's position was as a mage, and all the players were very clear about what would happen to a mage once he was close to them. Gryffindor's only chance to win was to think of a way to stop the prophet's sword from getting close to him. However, this was already impossible. All of Gryffindor's spells were perfectly predicted and avoided by the prophet's sword goddess. In the end, it was inevitable that the prophet's sword goddess would get close to him. Although the prophet's sword goddess's swordsmanship was also bad, Gryffindor's swordsmanship was worse. Moreover, the prophet's sword goddess could also predict the opponent's next attack perfectly and avoid it. In the end, the prophet's sword goddess broke Gryffindor's personal shield with one strike. The match was declared over, and Ashima won. Gryffindor walked back to Harry Chong-Rua's side dejectedly. Then, he could not help but start crying uncontrollably. This was probably the worst defeat she had ever suffered in her career as a sword mistress. She, who had won the Great Eight Academies tournament 3 times in the past, was actually defeated in the second round. This really left her speechless. What made Gryffindor even more ashamed was that she had promised Harry Chong-Rua that she could easily get second place the night before. It's alright. Anyway, we can't get first or second place. As long as we're not the last place, it's fine. Harry Chong-Rua's consolation made Gryffindor cry even harder. Ashima wins, Harry Chong-Rua eliminated. The host's voice rang out, and Beckham, the City of London's swordsman, immediately stood up and gestured to the host. I'm willing to replace Harry Chong-Rua. Approved, Beckham eliminated. After the host finished speaking, Beckham shook his head suavely and made a shooting motion. He then left the martial arts field, leaving his position for Harry Chong-Rua. As a result, Ashima sat on the second floor, while Harry Chong-Rua sat on the fourth floor. I want to challenge the contestant from the Jerusalem Academy, Abdullah of Lung. After Ashima won, Xiao Bai immediately announced his opponent. It was Abdullah, who had defeated his friend from Munich and was sitting on the third floor. Very soon, Abdullah was defeated, and he set off on his way home with Beckham. The reason for Abdullah's defeat was very simple. His opponent, Xiao Bai, was a swordsman of the famed sword level. Similarly, he won by suppressing his opponent. At this time, the number of contestants who had been eliminated in the second round had already reached 4. There were still 6 battles left. If 4 more contestants could not be eliminated in these 6 battles, then an intra-floor duel would be held. The contestants from the 4th floor would challenge each other on the same floor until 8 contestants were eliminated. At this time, the person who chose his opponent was Andreevich, who was highly favored before the competition and was unanimously recognized as a strong candidate for the championship. The little boy, Andreevich, was a little shy, but he said in a mellow tone, "I want to challenge the contestant from the Jerusalem Academy, Miss Ashima." With regards to Andreevich's choice, the other contestants did not find it strange at all. Because in the world, the base city that was most displeased with Jerusalem was Moscow. The fearless fighting people had always been very dissatisfied with this kind of city that relied on religion to control people's hearts. In the previous Octahouses tournament, The swordsmen of the Moscow Academy would seize the opportunity to have an exciting battle with the swordsmen of Jerusalem. Therefore, it wasn't strange for Andreevich to choose Ashima as his opponent. It seems that this will be a fierce battle. The cameraman with Clairaudient could not help but sigh when he saw the two people walking onto the arena. Andreevich was already a famous powerful swordsman, and Ashima's battle just now also amazed all the spectators. The ability to foresee and predict everything caused everyone to tremble uncontrollably. This kind of battle that was completely controlled by someone else was really terrible. No one would want to fight with such an enemy who could predict everything. So in the eyes of the cameraman with Clairaudient and most of the audience, this battle must be as fierce as the battle between Ashima and Harry Chong-ro. Hey, how about we make a bet? Leslie Dracula suddenly turned her head and said to Gahan behind her, I bet that Andreevich can defeat this annoying Jerusalemite in 5 minutes. How about it? Bet with me. What's the bet? Gahan asked expressionlessly. If I win, you will challenge me later. How about it? Leslie Dracula said with a smile, but her bet was a bit strange. She actually took the initiative to ask Gahan to challenge her. No one knew what she was thinking. Okay. Gahan nodded, but I want to bet that Andreevich can finish the battle in 2 minutes. Are you willing to bet with me? What? Finish the battle in 2 minutes? Are you kidding me? Although Leslie Dracula had no doubt that Andreevich would win, she also deeply understood Ashima's fighting strength. She did not believe that the whole battle would last for 2 minutes. This Yuzhong person must be crazy. I'll bet with you. Leslie Dracula reached out her hand and put it in front of Gahan, indicating that she wanted to sign the bet by shaking hands with Gahan. Gahan did not answer with his mouth. Instead, he directly held Leslie Dracula's fair and delicate hand, and the bet was officially established. However, Gahan did not seem to notice that there was a pair of eyes secretly watching everything on the 3rd floor. His frosty face became even colder. This pervert. Liu Ling muttered softly. It seemed that the distance between her and Gahan was getting further and further apart. I lost. Leslie Dracula hung her head dejectedly. In less than 2 minutes, the all-seeing sword's protective shield had already exploded, leaving behind Ashima, whose expression could not be seen clearly, and Andreevich, who was holding the Vasilyevich with an honest smile. This was a battlefield filled with lightning, and the duration of the battle was also like lightning. The entire process of the battle went like this. After the announcement of the start of the battle, Andreevich held the Vasilyevich sword in his hand and dashed towards the prophet goddess like a bolt of lightning. And the prophet goddess, who had calmly dealt with all the enemy's attacks, seemed to have disappeared. The prophet began to panic. It seemed that not only could she not predict her opponent's next move, but she also could not use her prophecy ability. She just kept trying to escape from Andreevich's attack range. But that was impossible. Andreevich's movement speed was far higher than the prophet's. He was like a piece of dogskin plaster that could not be shaken off, clinging to the prophet tightly. On the other hand, the goddess of the prophet was brutally slashed by Andreevich in the most violent manner for an entire minute. Finally, the goddess of the prophet's protective shield was shattered by the lightning from the Vasilyevich sword. Such a result of the battle stunned all the audience. They simply could not understand why the prophet's sword seemed to have changed into a different swordmistress. She had lost her prophecy ability and only knew how to run away. It wasn't until a spirit sword level sword bearer posted a post on the forum that the secret was revealed. The prophet's sword was still the prophet's sword, and her ability to predict the future had not disappeared. It was just that the future she foresaw was meaningless. Because in the prophet sword's foresight, there was only one result in all the futures, and that was, she would be slashed by Andreevich's attack and her protective shield would be destroyed. When all the futures she foresaw had the same result, the ability to predict the future lost its meaning, because her future was doomed to be slashed by Andreevich. To put it simply, in the future foreseen by the prophet's sword, he would not be able to avoid Andreevich's violent attack speed. And all the calmness and confidence of the prophet goddess was based on the foreseen future of victory. Once she found that she had no future of victory, the prophet's sword would subconsciously believe that she would lose. With such a subconscious mind, she was doomed to lose in the future. Of course, there was a very important factor in this. It was the lightning effect of the Vasilyevic sword, which could paralyze the prophet goddess for a short period of time. Although the paralysis time was very short and had almost no effect on melee combat, it could interrupt the prophet goddess's prophecy. But it could interrupt the prophet goddess's prophecy. Without the ability to prophesy, the prophet's sword, which only had the ability to foresee, was inferior to even the most ordinary famed sword mistress. Chapter 8:19. No one would have thought that the second team to be eliminated would be the Jerusalem City Academy led by the Saintess. Before this, whenever there was a Saintess, Jerusalem would always be in the top 3. However, this time, they were the second team to be eliminated, right after Los Angeles. When Ashma left, she was very calm, as if being the second to be eliminated did not make her feel that bad at all. This was because Ashma knew that although the Elite 8 Academies tournament this time was full of powerhouses of the younger generation, there were actually more than 10 famous sword-level contestants. However, with so many famous sword-level sword-bearers, most of them were just pitiful participants. The real champion would still have to be chosen between those two. However, before leaving, Ashma suddenly approached Liuyan Ling, then lowered her head and whispered something in her ear. This was the first time that the Saintess of Jerusalem had spoken to someone alone in the Elite 8 Academies tournament. The content of their conversation aroused the curiosity of the audience, but unfortunately, no one knew what they said. Ashma left in the end, which meant that Jerusalem Academy had failed. This was a topic that the audience would usually discuss for a long time, but at this moment it did not cause any wave. This was because everyone's attention was on the next contestant. The pride of the people of Yanjing, Miss Liuyan Ling, was finally going to show everyone her strength. Seeing that their pride, Liuyan Ling, stood up, the audience cheered. They began to wonder who Liuyan Ling would choose as her opponent. In theory, Liuyan Ling did not have many choices. She could only choose from Guhan, Leslie Dracula, and Andreevich, who were on the first and second levels. Of course, Liuyan Ling could also choose from a contestant on the third or fourth level. However, this was meaningless. If she won, she would not be promoted, but if she lost, she would be eliminated, although it was impossible for Liuyan Ling to be eliminated. I want to challenge Yanjing City's contestant, Passerby B. To everyone's surprise, Liuyan Ling's opponent was not the 3 people on the first 2 levels, but Passerby B, who was from the same academy as her. Of course, there was nothing much to say. Passerby B was naturally defeated. However, it wasn't an ugly defeat. It actually lasted a full 5 minutes under Liuyan Ling's attack before Liuyan Ling destroyed its protective shield. Of course, this was the result of Liuyan Ling deliberately suppressing her strength. Liuyan Ling only used the simplest of sword techniques to fight. She didn't use any skills during the entire fight, so it wasn't surprising that a passerby could last for 5 minutes. Big Brother, can you analyze why Miss Linlin wants to challenge our own people from Yanjing City? The cameramen all asked the experienced cameraman with the clairaudient. Faced with this question, the clairaudient cameraman could only shrug his shoulders, indicating that he did not know either. However, what the audience did not understand was why Liuyan Ling did not challenge Leslie Dracula and Guhan, whom she could easily defeat. Instead, she chose to challenge her own people. What was Liuyan Ling up to? The audience could not understand at all. Next was Letitia's turn. Like Liuyan Ling, Letitia chose to challenge her own people, Xiao Bai, to maintain the current order. As a result, Guhan was the only one left who did not challenge. In fact, Guhan, who was sitting on the first level, was the most miserable one because there was no benefit to his battles. No matter who he challenged, no matter who he won or lost, the outcome would not change. I challenge Yanjing City's contestant, Passerby B. Passerby B was probably the most tragic guy. He was challenged by Liuyan Ling and Gohan respectively. In addition to the time he challenged Gohan, he had already gone through 3 battles. Of course, the outcome did not need to be written down. Passerby B naturally failed for the 3rd time. I've been defeated by His Majesty Gohan twice in a row. It shows that I'm a very special person in His Majesty's heart. Many years later, the old Passerby B boasted to his grandchildren. At this point, the first round of the second round of challenges had ended. Jean Yujia, Munich, Ashima, Abdullah, and Beckham were eliminated one after another. As a result, the contestants on the 4th level had to challenge each other for one more round to determine the last 3 to be eliminated. After another round of matches that seemed very intense to the audience, but were somewhat boring to Gohan and the other sword bearers, Passerby A, Bell Grills, and Xiao Bai were eliminated. Gohan has obtained 24 points, Leslie Dracula has obtained 22 points, Andreevich has obtained 22 points, Letitia has obtained 18 points, Liuyan Ling has obtained 18 points, and Passerby A has obtained 18 points. The host announced the final result. The order after the competition was as follows. Gohan was still sitting on the 1st level. Leslie Dracula and Andreevich were sitting on the 2nd level, while Letitia, Liuyan Ling, Harry Chang-Rua, and Passerby B were sitting on the 3rd level. As a result, 2 of the 8 base cities had been completely eliminated, and the remaining base cities only had their trump cards still sitting on the thrones. Only Yanjing City had 2 people left. Based on the total score of all the base cities, Yanjing City rushed to the 1st place with a total score of 74 points. Yuzhong City's 68 points followed closely behind, followed by London City's 60 points, Berlin City's 54 points, Moscow City's 42 points, and Buenos Aires City's 32 points were at the bottom. Realizing this result, Leslie Dracula could not help but feel a little anxious. She was aiming for the 2nd place, but why was her base city already in the last place? If this continued, she might be eliminated in the next round. However, Leslie Dracula could rest assured, because the 3rd round of the 8 Academies tournament was not a simple elimination round. It was also the only round in the 5 rounds that did not require elimination. However, one must not underestimate this round, because the points of this round would be separated from the fixed 24 points system. It was the only round in the tournament where one could freely score points, and it was the only round in which one had to leave the thrones to play. The name of the 3rd round was Hide and Seek. As the name suggested, this was a game called Hide and Seek that only children would play. However, this competition did not require the contestants to find any treasures, but their own sword ladies. As everyone knew, the strength of a sword bearer's ability had a lot to do with the tacit understanding between him and his sword lady. Therefore, this competition was actually a test of the tacit understanding between the sword bearer and the sword lady, as well as the sword bearer's ability to deduce the details of the clues. After the competition began, the sword bearer would first release a sword lady, and the staff of the organizing committee would take her away. The sword bearer would then drink a bowl of chuha soup to temporarily cut off the connection between himself and the sword lady. Then, the sword lady would be given 100 hiding places by the organizing committee as her hiding place. The organizing committee would then mix this hiding place among the 100 different places, allowing the sword bearer to find where his sword lady was. Because of the chuha soup, all the contestants' dimensional pockets could not be used. At the same time, the contestants were also prohibited from using any private transportation. If they wanted to go somewhere, they would have to take the public transportation system or simply rely on their own pair of fat legs to find the sword lady. Yanjing City was incomparably huge. If one wanted to run around with their own pair of fat legs, It was estimated that it would be impossible to go to all the 100 places in 10 days and 10 nights. There should be no more than 5 places that the contestants could really find. Therefore, this required the sword-bearer to guess their sword lady's preferences. Otherwise, even if they broke their own legs, they would not be able to find their own sword lady. After the competition begins, each of you will have 60 points. Every 3 minutes that pass, 1 point will be deducted. When you find your sword lady, your points will be fixed, and you will also receive the fixed points. If you still do not find anything after 3 hours, then the competition will be declared over, and you will naturally not get any points. The host explained the rules for obtaining points one last time. Then, a staff member handed a slip of paper with a clue to Gohan, and the competition officially began. After that, every contestant received a message on their personal terminal. The message listed 100 places, and Gohan had to find the place his sword lady would choose from among the 100 places. Chinpin, oh Chinpin, it's finally time for you to be of use. Gohan glanced at the 100 places and revealed a trace of a gratified smile. It was indeed a correct choice for him to send Chinpin as his sword lady to participate in the competition. While Gohan was observing these places, the other contestants rushed out like arrows released from a bow, and began to madly rush towards the first place they had determined. Gohan, on the other hand, leisurely walked out of the martial arts arena. What place would Chinpin, that adorably annoying glutton, choose? Gohan did not need a brain to guess. Naturally, it would be something related to eating, and furthermore, it would be something related to meat. And among the 100 places, Gohan immediately saw the name of a Chanel pork restaurant. What else was there to guess? Chinpin would definitely choose that place and eat without restraint. The only pity was that this Chanel pork restaurant was a bit far from the martial arts arena. It would probably take Gohan half an hour to get there on the city rail. Forget it, if it was far, then so be it. Gohan shook his head and hurriedly took the city rail. Sure enough, after half an hour, he arrived at the Chanel pork restaurant that was still open for business. Through the glass from afar, Gohan could vaguely see a small figure directly sitting at the table, grabbing the pork and eating to his heart's content. Chinpin. But when Gohan walked into the restaurant and stood next to the table, he was shocked to find that the person eating and drinking to his heart's content wasn't Chinpin at all, but someone else that Gohan had never thought of. Gu Xuanwu, why are you here? Chapter 820. Gu Xianwu, why are you here? Gohan once again asked this question, because Gohan clearly handed Gu Xianwu over to the 3 Egyptian gods for protection, and let her stay outside the city with peace of mind. But how did she suddenly appear in the city? I haven't been to Yanjing City yet. Can I see what it looks like here? Gu Xuanwu pouted his mouth in dissatisfaction. Oh right, you came at the right time. This guy keeps circling around me asking for money. I already told him that I have no money, but he still keeps asking me for money. You can help me pay for him. The person Gu Xianwu was talking about was the lobby manager standing next to him with an awkward face. Hearing Gu Xianwu let Gohan pay, the lobby manager said with relief, Sir, thank you for your kindness. Your girlfriend has spent a total of 180,000 renminbi. Do you want to pay in one go, or pay in installments? It seemed that the lobby manager did not expect Gohan to be able to pay Gu Xianwu's bill in one go, so he took the initiative to pay in installments. You and Chinpin are related by blood, right? Eating a meal at Chanel costs 100,000 renminbi. By the way they sit at the table and eat is exactly the same as Chinpin. They can't really be locked up together for a long time, they are actually so compatible. Gohan thought silently in his heart, and then happily paid Gu Xianwu's bill in one go. The lobby manager was so happy that his face turned into a chrysanthemum, and he kept bowing to Gohan. How long have you been here? Gohan suddenly asked. 2 hours and 7 minutes. Gu Xianwu answered accurately, as expected of Gohan's daughter. She was so sensitive to the calculation of time. Then have you seen Qinpin come here? Guhan asked. Aunt Qinpin? Has she been here? Gu Xianwu immediately looked around, then shook his head. Aunt Qinpin definitely hasn't been here, otherwise I would definitely be able to smell her. That's strange, Qinpin actually didn't come to Chanel. Guhan's calculation was actually wrong. This made Guhan feel a deep sense of defeat. In his mind, he kept recalling the names of the 100 places he had just mentioned, trying to see if he had missed any. With Qingpin's greedy personality, she actually gave up the temptation of Chanel. There must be something more tempting to her. Gu Han started his analysis from the perspective of a poor person. Think about it, in a poor person's outlook on life, what is more important than food? Wait, in Qingpin's view, is there really something more important than eating? Guhan sadly found that after thinking for a minute, he still couldn't figure out what in Qingpin's heart could be more important than eating. Could it be sleeping? Qingpin had two hobbies, eating and sleeping. Qingpin spent more than half of her life sleeping, and she especially liked to sleep in Guhan's baby pouch. She often slept for an entire day, day and night. But there was one thing, unless it was a special situation, when it was mealtime, our Qingpin would immediately jump out of bed, never missing a single meal. From this point, it was very obvious that Qingpin loved to eat far more than she loved to sleep. Therefore, Gu Han didn't even think about sleeping just now. But since eating wasn't right, then he could only think of places related to sleeping. Coincidentally, among these 100 locations there were 2 furniture markets, which had a lot of soft beds. Maybe Qingpin was sleeping on one of them. Among these 2 locations, one was very close to Guhan's current position, about 5 minutes away, so Guhan prepared to walk there, to see if Qingpin was sleeping on a certain bed. Go, follow me. Guhan grabbed Gu Xuanwu's hand, and pulled her out of the Chanel restaurant, ready to go to the nearest market. And the moment Gu Xuanwu's hand was grabbed by Guhan, it could be seen that Gu Xuanwu wanted to instinctively resist, trying to break free from Guhan's hand. But Gu Xuanwu immediately stopped her instinct, her face was red, and she let Guhan lead her to jog all the way. Don't misunderstand, this was not a shy blush, but a warm blush, a blush produced after feeling the warmth of a family. If what Gu Xuanwu said was true, then this pitiful child had never been held by his father since he was born. How did you become a human? In fact, when Gu Xuanwu clearly appeared in front of him, Guhan had already discovered that Gu Xuanwu and the Gu Xuanwu he met outside the city before had a fundamental change. This change was not in appearance, but in physique. The Gu Xuanwu that he saw outside the city was a Yuanko that exuded the unique aura of Yuanko from head to toe. But the current Gu Xuanwu was the complete opposite. Inside and outside, she had completely become a human. Probably this was the reason why she could only move around in Yanjing City. Speaking of which, this is somewhat similar to Sha Sha. Guhan secretly thought. I am the daughter of a human and Yuan Ko. Naturally I have the characteristics of a human and Yuan Ko. Gu Xuanwu explained in a low voice, as long as I am willing, I can freely switch between human form and Yuan Ko form. It's just that I can't use any power in human form, otherwise I will immediately change back into Yuan Ko form. That's a bit strange. Hearing Gu Xuanwu's explanation, Guhan couldn't help but have some doubts in his heart. Because this was different from the traditional understanding of humans and Yuan Ko mixed blood. For example, Shi Shui Takahate Rina. She was a combination of Yuan Ko's body and human soul, so a part of her body belonged to Yuan Ko, and the other part belonged to a human, like 2 dumplings put together. However, the Gu Xuanwu was different. According to her, her body could freely switch between a human and a Yuanko. When she was a human, she was the same human. When she was Yuan Ko, she was the real Yuan Ko. This was completely different from Shi Shui. If the previous Shi Shui could do this, she probably wouldn't be so entangled with her identity. Then how did you enter the city? What about Bast and the other two? Gohan asked again. The three of them aren't of much use. Gu Xuanwu didn't hide her disdain for the three of them. I only used a small trick, and they went to hide and seek all over the mountain. Gohan was speechless. It was hide and seek again. But things shouldn't be so simple. Among the three of them, Ice Eyes and Anubis's intelligence wasn't high, but Bast was very smart. How could she be tricked by Gu Xuanwu so easily? There must be a problem here. Although he knew there was a problem, Gohan didn't plan to expose it, and continued to ask, "You clearly don't have a personal terminal. The city gate should take you to the personal terminal management office." Although he knew there was a problem, Gohan didn't plan to expose it, and continued to ask, "You clearly don't have a personal terminal. The city gate should take you to the personal terminal management office." To enter the city, it wasn't as simple as being a human. There was still a series of tests, the most important of which was to check your personal terminal. If you don't have a personal terminal, you will be taken to the personal terminal management office by the guards. Then, your DNA will be verified there, and your identity will be confirmed. If there's no DNA data in the database, then you will be locked up in the personal terminal management office, and your identity will be more stringent. They must clarify your identity. Therefore, without a personal terminal, and without your DNA in the database, Gu Xuanwu should be locked up in the management office, and not wandering around Yanjing City. Who said I don't have a personal terminal? Gu Xuanwu raised her hand, and a slightly bulging personal terminal could be clearly seen under her skin. Ding! Would you like to add Gu Xuanwu to your contact list? Gohan didn't believe it, and used her own personal terminal to touch Gu Xuanwu's personal terminal, and then heard her personal terminal make a notification, asking Gohan if he wanted to add Gu Xuanwu as a friend. This meant that Gu Xuanwu's personal terminal was a genuine personal terminal, which could explain why Gu Xuanwu could enter and leave Yanjing City freely. But then there was a new problem. How did Gu Xuanwu get her own personal terminal? Where did you get your personal terminal? Gohan's voice fluctuated. This was given to me by Auntie Qinpin. Gu Xuanwu covered her personal terminal and said, "It was given to me by Auntie Qinpin before she left. She said that if I wanted to find her, I could take this thing to Yuzhong City." What the hell is this thing? This personal terminal was actually given to Gu Xuanwu by Qinpin? After repeated questioning by Gohan, she finally figured it out a little. Gu Xuanwu once said that when she was a child, she and Qinpin were locked up in a place together for a long time. It was during that time that Gu Xuanwu firmly remembered the smell of Auntie Qinpin, and it was also when they separated that Qinpin gave this personal terminal to Gu Xuanwu. It turned out that Qinpin was the mastermind. Gohan gritted his teeth. Speaking of Qinpin, where the hell did she go? While they were talking, Gohan had already rushed to the furniture city and turned the entire furniture city upside down, but he could not find any trace of Qinpin. Therefore, Gohan had no choice but to take the city railway to the other furniture city. However, the distance between the two furniture cities was very far. Even if he took the city railway, it would take Gohan about 45 minutes to get there. While he was taking the city railway, a message was sent to Gohan's personal terminal through the internet. Participant Andreevich found his sword mistress, Courage Golden Sword, in 1 hour and 17 minutes. He has obtained 35 points. The first winner had appeared. It was Andreevich from Moscow College, who was the first to find his sword mistress. That was a total of 35 points. Gohan had only obtained 48 points in the previous 2 rounds. Chapter 821. Where the hell did the poor scammer run off to? In the second furniture store, there was still no sign of Qinpin. Gohan couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Originally, this kind of anxiety wouldn't easily appear on Gohan. But as Gohan's personality gradually softened, this kind of emotion appeared more and more easily. People were like this. When they were desperate for something, other changes wouldn't be able to affect this person's mood. But once this person had a lot of things that they wanted to protect, this person would become more and more like an ordinary person. So everyone who is reading, please protect the treasures that you should protect. Don't inadvertently lose them. And at this time, the second contestant who found her own sword lady appeared. That was Leslie Dracula, whom Gohan interacted with the most among all the contestants. This girl had obtained 30 points. What does Ching Pin see as more important than eating? Gohan once again pondered, but the result was the same as the previous time. He couldn't think of anything that surpassed eating in Ching Pin's heart. What are you thinking about? Gu Xuanwu held a large roasted sausage in his hand and directly stabbed it into his mouth. Then he bit off a large portion of the roasted sausage and asked Gohan while chewing, "Do you know what Ching Pin likes the most?" It seemed like Gohan really couldn't think of what Ching Pin liked. So he asked Gu Xuanwu, who seemed to be his daughter. That's right, if Gu Xuanwu really spent a lot of time with Ching Pin, then maybe Gu Xuanwu could provide some useful information. Of course it's eating. In the end, Gu Xuanwu's information wasn't surprising at all. Aunt Ching Pin is a great existence that can eat an entire cow in one go. When Gu Xuanwu said this, his face revealed an incomparable expression of admiration. It seemed like Ching Pin really did perform in front of Gu Xuanwu the difficult task of eating an entire cow. Yes. Gohan grunted, hoping that Gu Xuanwu would give him any useful information was simply a delusion. Her understanding of Ching Pin was only limited to eating. Gohan made it sound as if her understanding of Ching Pin was not limited to eating. In fact, most of the people who were watching here only had an understanding of Ching Pin that was limited to eating. But Auntie Ching Pin doesn't admit this. Gu Xuanwu did not know that Gohan had already given up on obtaining information from her, as she continued to speak with great interest. I once asked Auntie Ching Pin what she liked the most. Is it your favorite food? But Auntie Ching Pin wouldn't admit it no matter what. She said that she didn't like to eat the most, but she liked Gohan the most. Speaking till here, Gu Xuanwu suddenly slapped her own head. That's right, Auntie Ching Pin once said the name Gohan, how could I forget it, and even stupidly asked you what my father's name was. Even if you remembered this name, at that time you didn't know that Gohan was your father. Gohan curled her lips. Suddenly, Gohan also wanted to slap her own head. Gohan. That's right, Ching Pin's favorite thing really isn't eating, but Gohan Gohan's face was flushed with excitement as well as a deep sense of self-blame. I'm really a fool, I actually only saw Ching Pin stuffing herself with food, but I didn't see Ching Pin's attachment to me. I forgot that she likes to stay in her own nursery bag to sleep the most. I forgot that she likes to call Gohan's name the most when she has nothing to do. I forgot that she likes to run to my side when she sleeps the most, and lie on my body to sleep peacefully. I forgot that she likes to stuff her feet into her mouth the most. Alright, this doesn't count. I forgot that without me by her side, even if I gave her countless braised pork, she still wouldn't be able to swallow it. P.S. This is Gohan thinking too much. Ching Pin's favorite place to live the most is me. I'm still thinking about eating stupidly. Where did my usual intelligence go? Gohan suddenly felt a lot of emotions. The expression on her face was constantly changing, looking like a moving emoji pack. Gu Xuanwu, who was looking at her, was stunned, and began to doubt whether this guy was that cold and ruthless father. I think I know where Ching Pin is. Gohan let out a long sigh of relief. After figuring out that Ching Pin's favorite thing was herself, Gohan already knew where Ching Pin was. Where is he? Although she didn't know why Gohan was looking for Ching Pin, Gu Xuanwu still couldn't help but ask. She also missed Aunt Ching Pin, and she missed the milk fragrance on Aunt Ching Pin's body. Since smelling this smell again, Gu Xuanwu had been insomnia for several consecutive nights. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so anxious to run to Yanjing City to find Gohan. It's here. An address was projected in Gohan's personal terminal, only to see the words, Bone Cold Ice Drink Wholesale Market, written on it. Why is it here? Gu Xuanwu asked blankly. Qing Popper is a cute girl who can't read, so she could only listen to other people reading her name. Then she must have heard Guhan as Guhan. Guhan, who had regained his intelligence, immediately guessed what had happened. Fortunately, the bone-cold ice drink wholesale market wasn't far from Guhan's current location. Guhan only needed to pull Gu Xuanwu at a speed of 40 kilometers per hour for a whole 15 minutes to reach the destination. And once they reached the bone-cold ice drink wholesale market, Guhan could hear a loud and clear cry. Ugh! Guhan, where are you? Qinpin is hungry. Qinpin wants to eat meat. Qinpin wants to go to Chanel. Qinpin doesn't want to stay here. Hearing this voice, Guhan knew that Qinpin couldn't run away. She was definitely in this bone-cold ice drink wholesale market. Sure enough, when Guhan walked into the wholesale market, he saw a group of people surrounding a shop. Guhan went forward to secretly observe, and found a group of distressed shop owners holding popsicles in their hands to tease the pitiful Qinpin. And while Qinpin was shouting Guhan's name, shouting that she wanted to eat meat, she also took the popsicle that the shop owner handed over. With a crunch, she bit off the whole popsicle and swallowed it in one breath. Guhan. Qinpin's stomach is so cold. Qinpin is pregnant. Hurry up and come out. Qinpin's snot and tears flowed together, but she didn't forget to continue stuffing popsicles into her mouth. These shop owners were really unlucky to have Qinpin's crying sound that shook the 9 heavens, not only making them unable to do business, but also making their heads hurt. The invincible cute sword Maiden could only try to calm her down with popsicles. Unfortunately, the most effective thing to deal with crying little brats was useless at this moment. Instead, it was like throwing a meat bun at a dog. It was like throwing a meat bun at a dog. It was like throwing a meat bun at a dog. Just the amount of popsicles that Qinpin ate probably exceeded tens of thousands of RMB. And behind Qinpin, there were 2 committee members with armbands standing there. They were responsible for protecting and making sure that the sword Maiden didn't run around, but at this moment their faces, which were usually solemn, had an ashamed expression that made it seem like they wanted to escape. How could this Yuzhang guy's sword Maiden be so amazing? They had been working as the staff of the 8 Academy Conference for more than 10 years, and they had never seen a sword maiden who could cry and eat so much. Guhan also felt that he couldn't observe her in secret anymore, otherwise his reputation would be completely ruined by this cute girl. So, Guhan directly pushed through the crowd of onlookers and walked in front of the shop where Qinpin was sitting. Lord Guhan, you're finally here. Seeing Guhan's arrival, the 2 committee members finally shed tears of relief and said with great emotion, "Great, they were finally free." Guhan! Seeing Guhan appear, Qinpin immediately threw away the 2 popsicles in her hands and put on an extremely excited posture. Her chubby little feet jumped hard on the shop owner's unlucky freezer, and she directly jumped into Guhan's arms. Guhan. They're so bad. They lied to me that you're here, they lied to me that there's meat to eat here, and they almost turned me into a popsicle. Guhan. Qinpin rubbed her cold little face against Guhan's face again, and wiped her lips that were covered with cold syrup on Guhan's neck. Then, she wailed pitifully, as if eating popsicles was a very unlucky thing. Ahem, you actually came here to eat meat? Guhan's expression was a little ugly. Yes, yes. Qinpin nodded vigorously, pointed to the 2 embarrassed staff behind her, and said angrily, I said I wanted to eat meat, but the 2 of them told me to ask you for meat. Then, they said you were here, so I came here. Guhan already didn't know what to say. It seemed that he was just thinking too much, and in the end, he still ended up eating Qinpin's favorite food. You've already eaten so much cold stuff today, so you're not allowed to eat any more fatty meat, or you'll have a stomachache. Guhan randomly found a reason that mothers often use to reject Qinpin's request to eat meat. This scammer, don't even think about eating meat for the rest of the day. I'll bite. The angry Qinpin was about to use her teeth to take revenge on Guhan, but Gohan directly stuffed an apple into her mouth. Good children should eat more fruits, said Gohan. Participant Gohan found his own sword Maiden, Chinpin sword, in 1 hour and 46 minutes, obtained 25 points. Gohan became the third participant to find his own sword Maiden. Although he was a little unhappy, the competition still had to continue. So, just as Gohan was about to return to the training field, he suddenly felt a small hand tugging at his clothes. I finally meet you, Sir Military Governor. Hearing the two words, Military Governor, Gohan instinctively turned around and saw a cute black-haired girl wearing a small golden straw hat looking at him with a smile. I think I've seen you before. Seeing the girl's appearance clearly, Gohan said instinctively, "What a really old-fashioned line. Hee, long time no see. I'm the true everlasting nation, do you still remember me? A character buried in 650 chapters. Ha 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 ha, I wonder who still remembers this character." Chapter 822. A long time ago, actually, just a few months ago, when the King Arthur's betrayal dungeon was still being cleared, Gohan had bought 6 tokens of the Heavenly Sword from the auction house. During this process, Gohan got to know the young mistress of the auction house. Oh, that's not right, the young master, the true everlasting nation. After parting ways at the auction house, Gohan and the true everlasting nation had not communicated in the game. Who would have thought that they would meet again in real life? The true everlasting nation was still dressed as a cute girl in real life. According to the rules of the game, the gender of the game character must be the same as the gender of the character in real life. In other words, the true everlasting nation should also be a boy in real life. Thinking of this, Gohan instinctively took a step back. Logically speaking, it was said that there was a period of time when girls with big dicks were very popular. Even now, there was still the existence of the Big Dicks Divine sect on the internet. However, Gohan guaranteed that he did not have such a preference. But thinking about it carefully, Gohan seemed to be more thorough. After all, there was still the existence of Gu Xian fate. Lord Military Governor, do you think that Chang Ruo is very strange? Seeing Gohan's reaction, the true everlasting nation could not help but say gloomily, "In this world, there are many things that people cannot choose for themselves. If I had a choice, Chang Ruo would really like to be reincarnated into a real girl's body and not be a hateful boy." Ahem. Gohan coughed. This is not your fault, it's the world's fault. But now that medicine is so advanced, you can change your gender. What Gohan said was the truth. Even before the apocalypse, humans had already successfully mastered the technology to change their gender. Now that medicine was even more advanced, other than the fact that they could not give birth, they would be exactly the same as a real girl in other aspects. I am the only descendant of the Chang Ruo family. If I change my gender, then the Chang Ruo family will disappear from this world. Chang Ruo, I cannot be so selfish. The true everlasting kingdom said sorrowfully. It turned out that he had not chosen to change his sex because of his family's inheritance. Chang Ruo family. Gohan muttered to himself for a while. Gohan had heard of the Chang Ruo family before, but their family was not an Emperor Sword family. In fact, they did not even have an immortal sword rank sword wielder. The founder of the family was merely a spirit sword rank sword wielder. However, Chang Ruo's family head had something that made everyone click their tongues in wonder. This was because every 3 generations, the heir of this family would definitely become a sword bearer, and at the very least, they would become a famed sword-level sword bearer. No one knew the reason behind it, but it had indeed happened. It was precisely because a sword-bearer would be born every 3 generations that the Chang Ruo family had never produced any top-notch sword-bearers, nor did they have much of a background. However, they were able to continue as a sword-bearer family, surpassing many families that had produced immortal sword-level sword-bearers. Wait, isn't the Chang Ruo family the Chang Ruo family from London? Isn't Harry Chang Ruo the heir of that family? Could it be? Guhan carefully looked at the cross-dressing Chang Rua country. Removing the hair and makeup, wasn't this cross-dressing Chang Rua country the same hairy Chang Rua who had just been competing with him for the position of the throne? When did you change your clothes? Guhan asked with a frown. I didn't change my clothes. This is what I'm wearing inside the robe. Speaking up to this point, hairy Chang Rua suddenly beamed with joy. Isn't this very convenient? As long as the robe shines on my body, I'm a boy. As long as the robe is taken off, I become a cute girl. I wish you happiness. I'll return to the training field first. You can continue looking for your Gryffindor sword. Although Guhan couldn't accept this idea, this was the freedom of others. Guhan didn't want to criticize others, so he decided to leave the 36 stratagems. He had to get as far away from Harry Changrua as possible first. Wait, Mr. Military Governor, can you do me a favor? Harry Changrua hurriedly pulled Guhan's hand and pleaded with a kitten-like gaze. I've already looked in 4 places, but I still can't find Gryffindor. I know that Mr. Military Governor is the smartest man in the world. Please help me think where Gryffindor will be. This is your sword mistress. Why are you asking me? Guhan's frown deepened. Who would ask for help from their competitor? Mr. Military Governor. Harry Changrua suddenly hugged Guhan's waist and began to act like a spoiled child. All right. Let go of me first. Guhan was helpless. If he hit a woman on the streets, his reputation in Yanjing would probably be even worse. So, Guhan could only agree to Harry Changrua's request. Show me your 100 locations. Harry Changrua quickly announced the 100 locations that belonged to him. Guhan only took a glance and pointed to a place. Go there and take a look. Gryffindor is most likely there. Cat Paradise. Harry Changrua looked at the location that Guhan pointed out and felt baffled. How could Gryffindor be in Cat Paradise? I've already pointed it out for you. Whether you believe me or not is up to you. I don't care. With that, Guhan pulled Gu Black Tortoise and disappeared from Harry Changrua's side. After separating from Harry Changrua, Gu Black Tortoise asked Guhan curiously, why is Gryffindor in Cat Paradise? Because Gryffindor's body is sealed with the soul of a lion. So, Gryffindor's soul is built on the foundation of the soul of a lion. In other words, Gryffindor is a lion. Guhan paused. Lions belong to the feline family. No feline would dislike Cat Paradise. I think Gryffindor must be having a good time there. Not happy. Chinpin is not having a good time at all. Chinpin poked her head out of the pouch in front of Guhan's chest and stroked her cold belly. Chinpin will never go to Guhan's place again. They're all liars. They've spoiled Chinpin's little belly. Aunt Chinpin, are you pregnant? Gu Black Tortoise tilted her head and looked at Chinpin in the pouch. I remember Aunt Lativa touching her belly like this when she was pregnant. Yes, yes. The poor man nodded his head repeatedly. Then, his chubby face revealed a mysterious expression of I'll only tell you in secret. It's been 3 months, shut up. Guhan pressed Chinpin down. This cheater. Strange, where have I seen that swordsman before? With Chinpin's departure, the chilling bone-cold drinks wholesale market gradually regained its peace. Everyone returned to their own shops to continue their business. However, the person on the second floor of the shop muttered to himself with a puzzled look. He had witnessed the entire process from the second floor, and to his surprise, he had seen the sword wielder who had taken the sword Maiden away somewhere before. He looked very familiar. But where have I seen him before? I haven't even stepped out of the shop for a month. The person could not figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. He had no choice but to put down the camera in his hand and return to his computer. He was ready to continue scrolling through the forum to see if there was any interesting news. Then, he would brag to some of his familiar friends on the forum or argue with a few familiar opponents. The post, in broad daylight. The Exit Management Office publicly posts KB, appeared in front of him. Why did this post get pushed to the front page again? Isn't it just KB? What's there to be excited about? The person had read this post dozens of times and was really not interested in reading it again. So, just as he was about to skip this post, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Wait, the swordsman just now seems to be. He quickly clicked on the post again and found the photo in the post. He flipped to the photo that was taken from a top-down perspective. He could only see half of the man's face and the woman squatting under the man's crotch. Then, he took a picture of the swordsman from the perspective of the second floor from his camera. After comparing them, the person in the two pictures was exactly the same. Big news! Big news! The person laughed so hard that his nose was crooked. I can finally make a big news story. So, a few minutes later, a post titled, "The Truth Revealed. The former master of the sword Garrett in Yuzhong City is a big pervert," appeared in the Yanjing City forum and instantly caused an uproar. Participant Harry Changrua has found his own sword mistress, Gryffindor sword. Time used, 2 hours and 03 minutes. Points awarded, 19. Under Gu Han's guidance, Harry Changrua successfully found his own sword mistress. Contestant Ladya found her sword lady, William II sword. Took 2 hours and 04 minutes. Obtained 19 points. In just a minute, Ladya also successfully found her sword lady. This way, there were only 2 contestants left who had not found their sword lady, and both of them were contestants from Yanjing City. Liunian Ling and the passerby B still had not found their sword lady. Seeing this scene, the audience in Yanjing City could not help but feel a little excited. There was less than an hour left. If Yanjing City did not get anything in this round, it would be fine if their points were pulled down by a lot. What's worse was that Yanjing City would lose face. Didn't this mean that the swordsmen in Yanjing City and their sword lady had a very bad rapport? Or did the descendant of the Liunian family of this generation have a very bad rapport with their sword lady? Chapter 8:23. Come to think of it, I still don't know who Liunian Ling's famed sword mistress is. Just as Gohan was wondering if Liunian Ling did not know much about her famed sword mistress, his personal terminal rang. Gohan opened it and saw that it was Liunian Ling calling. Didn't she fall out with me? Why is she contacting me? Gohan shook his head in confusion, but he still quickly picked up Liunian Ling's call. Do me a favor. I can find my sword mistress. Liunian Ling went straight to the point and asked Gohan to help her find a sword mistress. Sure. Gohan agreed readily, but you have to tell me who your famed sword mistress is first. The 3-foot sword. Liunian Ling also answered readily. It really is the 3-foot sword. Gohan smiled bitterly when he heard the name. The 3-foot sword. What a familiar name. Once upon a time, this was the famed sword mistress that Gohan was determined to obtain. However, due to various reasons, his famed sword mistresses became the Chidian sword and the Juzi sword. The 3-foot sword, which was originally the number 1 famed sword mistress, naturally had no fate with Gohan. However, thinking about it carefully, the Juzi sword and the Chidian sword were not weaker than the 3-foot sword. If that was the case, Gohan did not suffer much of a loss. He did not expect the 3-foot sword to fall into Liunian Ling's hands after he had no fate with it. However, there was nothing strange about this. The Liunian family was the strongest family among the families, and Liunian Ling was one of the strongest famed sword mistresses in the world. The 3-foot sword had also become the sword mistress of the Liunian family many times in history. It was not strange that Liunian Ling could be in sync with the 3-foot sword. However, this made Gohan feel strange. Logically speaking, the Liunian family should be the family that knew the 3-foot sword the best. This was because the Liunian family had coordinated with the 3-foot sword the most and kept the most complete information about it. It was impossible for Liunian Ling to not know the 3-foot sword's preferences. Where did you look? Gohan asked after some thought. I found 6 places. They are the Bronze Museum, of History Museum, of History Museum, of Ancient History Museum, of Marine Biology Museum, of Marine Biology Museum, of Primitive Times, and of Ancient History Museum. Liuyan Ling of the 6 places. Why are these 6 places all museums, exhibition halls, and memorial halls? Gu Han asked in confusion. That's because the 1-meter sword likes these places. We found her at these places during the previous 6 astral competitions, Fleeting Lin said matter-of-factly. That's because the 3-foot sword likes these places. I found her at these places the last 6 times she participated in the octagon meet, Liuyan Ling said matter-of-factly. Could you cheat in Yanjing City be any more subtle? Are there any similar places on the list? Since the 3-foot sword had gone to such places the last 6 times, it clearly meant that the 3-foot sword had a special liking for such places. In that case, she might even go to a similar place. No, there are only these 6 exhibition halls on the list, Liuyan Ling answered very quickly. Send me a copy of your list. After Gohan said that, a document was sent to Gohan's personal terminal. Gohan looked through it quickly and tried to figure it out. Then, he looked around and immediately had an answer in his heart. He said to Liuyan Ling, "Your name." Gohan suddenly uttered such a baffling sentence. Are you kidding me? Don't you know my name? Don't tell me you've already forgotten my name? Liuyan Ling snorted coldly. Gohan seemed to be able to hear a storm brewing on the other end of the communication. Look at the list of places again. If you still don't understand, I don't care anymore, Gohan replied coldly. In the list of places projected by Gohan's personal terminal, a place called Your Name was written, and there was a subtle note, Video Cafe, below it. Wait! Liuyan Ling quickly flipped through the list. After a few seconds, she asked awkwardly, Why are you so sure that she is there? I don't have much time left. I can't waste any more time on the road. If you believe me, come over. If you don't believe me, I'll find her myself. Although Gohan's words were quite flat, the hidden unhappiness in them could not be concealed. Wait for me there. I'll be right there. With that, Liuyan Ling hung up. Why should I wait for her? Gohan looked at the cafe with the Your Name sign beside him. Inside the cafe, a gentle and quiet girl was sitting on a wooden rattan chair decorated with a few pots of orchid. She was drinking her coffee elegantly and looking at a tablet in her hand. Fortunately, Gohan had unrealistic expectations for the 3-foot sword, so he had a good grasp of the information on the 3-foot sword. Naturally, he knew what the 3-foot sword Maiden looked like. Hello, Lady 3-foot. Can I sit here? The 3-foot sword moved his gaze away from the iPad 12 Pro in his hand. The iPad 12 was the last version of the iPad produced before the apocalypse. It could be sold for millions of RMB on the black market. Even if you had the money, you might not be able to buy it. The iPad in the 3-foot sword's hand was well preserved. Could still be used even after 1,000 years. It could be seen that the owner of the iPad had protected it very well. This was clearly not something that ordinary people could own. Gohan guessed that Liuyan Ling must have given it to the 3-foot sword. How did Gohan know that Liuyan Ling had given it to the 3-foot sword? This was because there was a square family crest printed on the corner of the iPad. This family crest was naturally the family crest of the Liuyan aristocratic family. The design of this emblem was very complicated. It was not a simple geometric figure, nor was it a traditional emblem like a rose or a rose. There was a man and a woman drawn on it. They stood on either side of the crest, and their hands were grabbing a long sword in the middle of the crest. As for which lady swordplay this sword belonged to, Gohan did not know. It did not seem to be a lady swordplay that humans knew of. This was because a lady swordplay expert had once magnified the crest of the Liuyan aristocratic family by tens of times. However, they had discovered that the sword in the middle of the crest was not a sword known to humans. This was rather strange. In reality, it would be a long time before Gohan figured out the origins of this sword. Then, he would sigh at the absurdity of the world. Of course, Gohan did not care about this sword now. His attention was on the 3-foot sword lady. She looked at Gohan carefully, then nodded and said very gently, "Have a seat. This is a coffee shop. You don't have to ask for my opinion." Indeed, it was as the information said. The strongest lady swordplay, the 3-foot sword lady, was actually a very gentle girl. She was like a lady from an ancient family. She would smile at anyone she saw. "Why are you here?" Gohan asked curiously. "Do you know that your lady swordplay is going crazy looking for you? Otherwise, she wouldn't have asked me, her enemy, for your whereabouts. Because there's something interesting here." The 3-foot sword lady twirled the spoon in her coffee cup. "In my previous life, I really wanted to watch this movie that had just been discovered. Unfortunately, I fell into a deep sleep before I could watch it. Now that I'm awake, I naturally want to finish watching this movie." "Movie?" Gohan was stunned. He raised his head and looked at the counter. There were a few posters pasted on the counter. This coffee shop provides electronic copies of all kinds of old movies. You can enjoy the fragrant coffee while enjoying the wonderful old movies. This was the most eye-catching poster. This poster also clearly showed why this coffee shop was called the Video Coffee Shop. This was because this coffee shop's specialty was to provide copies of old movies to its customers. The second poster said, "Newly rescued old movie. 45% intact. From the classic Before the Apocalypse, Big Fish Begonia. Under a natural disaster, a tragic love story between a man and a fish." There were many other posters pasted beside this poster. They were all information about old movies that had just been discovered. With the continuous excavation of the relics before the apocalypse, many such old movies would be discovered. And this coffee shop could have its own foothold in Yenjing City because it could collect a lot of the latest movies. There were many such posters. Gohan's eyes kept sweeping over them. Finally, he stopped at a poster that was pressed in the innermost by many posters. The content of the poster was not clear. Only the 4 words, "Your name," were exposed. It was the same as the name of this coffee shop. Gohan knew this movie. When this movie was discovered, it caused a lot of sensation. People were amazed that the animated movie Before the Apocalypse could be so exquisite. Unfortunately, the completeness was not high. About 65% of the scenes could not be played. Therefore, people did not know the story of this movie. This video coffee shop was probably opened at that time. In order to increase its popularity, it took the same name as that famous movie. At that time, the 3-foot sword could only see the name of each location when choosing the location. Therefore, it could be inferred that the 3-foot sword wanted to watch this movie called Your Name. Therefore, he chose this coffee shop. However, why did the 3-foot sword want to watch this movie so much? Gohan was a little puzzled. "I've killed 2 Yuankos. One was called San Yi, and the other was called Long." The 3-foot sword's face suddenly showed a touch of melancholy. "Maybe I shouldn't have killed them. They didn't have it easy." Chapter 824. "Sir, what kind of coffee would you like?" the waitress asked softly as she approached Gohan. "The same as this lady." Gohan pointed at the 1-foot sword's coffee. However, upon hearing Gohan's request, the waitress looked troubled. "Sir, this lady's coffee is a little special. I'm afraid we can't give it to you." "Special?" Just as Gohan was about to ask what was so special about it, the 1-foot lady smiled and took out a glass bottle the size of a teacup. It contained a thick, golden yellow liquid. He didn't know what it was. "There's nothing special about my coffee. I just added a little of this. I wonder if Mr. Gohan would like to try it?" The 1-foot lady shook the glass bottle slightly. The golden liquid seemed to contain some kind of demon. "Thank you, 1-foot lady. I, Gohan, will do as you say." Gohan nodded. "Mr. Gohan, Do you really want to add it? The 1-foot lady opened the bottle, and a thick, bitter smell filled the entire cafe. Just the smell alone made the waitress beside Gohan pinch her nose. Is this bile? Gohan took a sniff and guessed. Mr. Gohan, you have a good nose. The 1-foot sword revealed a surprised expression. She knew that Gohan had guessed the origin of the golden liquid. This is the bile of the world's most poisonous golden boro snake. A drop of bile tastes like 100 tons of bitter gourds stacked together. Mr. Gohan, would you like a drop? I wonder how much did the 3-chi goddess add? Gohan asked. 3 drops. The 1-foot lady raised 3 fingers. 3 drops is too troublesome. Gohan smiled faintly and snatched the bottle of bile from the 3-foot sword lady's hand. Then, he poured a quarter of the bottle of bile, which was about half the size of a coffee cup, into the cup. He then gestured for the waiter to make him a cup of coffee. It's best for men not to be stubborn. Sometimes, bitterness can kill you. At that time, don't stop drinking after just 1 sip. Don't waste the high-quality bile that the Lu Nian clan painstakingly gathered. The 3-chi lady was taken aback at first, but then she said indifferently. From her words, she seemed to be a little displeased with Gohan's pretentious behavior. Clearly, she didn't think that Gohan would really drink this cup of coffee with so much golden Borneo snake bile. Gohan smiled and said nothing more. Because no matter how much he said, it would be useless. He might as well drink the entire cup of coffee. Only then would the other party have nothing to say. Soon, this cup of bitter coffee was served to him. Judging from the waiter's expression, as if his mother had died, the taste of this cup of coffee must be indescribable. Gohan took the coffee and poured it into his mouth without hesitation. As soon as the coffee entered his tongue, a bitterness that made his nerves tremble spread throughout Gohan's body. Gohan's hand trembled as he held the cup of coffee. It was as if he would spill the coffee on the table if he wasn't careful. Don't be too stubborn, the 1-foot lady reminded gently. However, Gohan was unmoved. He tilted his head back and poured the coffee into his stomach. Sigh. The 1-foot lady sighed, then said to the waitress, Miss, please call an ambulance and send this gentleman to the hospital to have his stomach pumped. There's no need. The taste is a little bitter, but it's not enough to kill me. Gohan waved his hand. Although there were a few drops of sweat on his forehead and his body trembled from time to time, it was obvious that Gohan was fine. You're amazing. The 3-chi Empress was convinced this time. She then nodded and said, Even I, the 3-chi Empress, would only dare to drink 3 drops of this golden ripple snake's bile. Mr. Gohan, your pain tolerance is truly beyond imagination. This little girl admires you. I admire you. This is also from training. Gohan smiled nonchalantly. Lady, you must know that snake gall can improve one's eyesight. When I was young, I needed a pair of good eyes when I practiced martial arts. Thus, I ate 3 raw snake galls every day to develop this pair of eyes. A little bit of bile is nothing to me. I see. The 1-foot lady nodded, then looked into Gohan's eyes. May I know why Mr. Gohan is looking for this little lady? It can't be that you just want a cup of bitter coffee from this little lady, right? I want to ask you a question. Since you're Ling's sword maiden, you must know what happened to Ling recently. Please don't misunderstand, I'm not interested in Ling's private life. I only want to know why Ling suddenly hates me so much. Gohan finally asked this question. Originally, Gohan didn't want to ask this question, because Gohan didn't think that Liunian Ling was that important to him. However, Gohan still asked this question in the end. This was the first time Gohan couldn't control his mouth. The 1-foot lady seemed to be hesitating whether to answer Gohan's question. However, at this moment, the infant pouch in front of Gohan's chest suddenly began to move. What good food are you eating? Why don't you ask Qing Pin to come with us? The poor man used his hands and feet to climb out of the incubator bag and onto the table. Then, he saw that there was still half a bottle of golden boros snake bile left on the table. This resplendent color was extremely tempting, as if it was a rare delicacy in the world. "You're all bad people. If I don't ask Ching Pin to drink something delicious, Ching Pin also wants to drink a mouthful." After saying that, Ching Popper grabbed the bottle of golden rippling snake bile at lightning speed and gulped it down in one gulp. This unlucky child's appetite was really big. Good times. Ching Pin couldn't say anything else. She directly fell onto the table and fainted. She was already exhaling more than she was inhaling. This foodie finally ate herself to death. "Is she okay?" The 1-meter lady stretched out her palm and rubbed Ching Pin's stomach. Then she burped. A bitter smell that could suffocate everyone instantly filled the cafe. The waiters had already fled out. The 2 staff members of the committee, who were responsible for watching over the 1-meter lady, could only hold their noses in tears and breathe through their mouth. "This is..." In an instant, the 1-meter lady seemed to see something. Her eyebrows suddenly jumped, and her hand moved away from Ching Pin's stomach. "Mr. Gohan, you'd better keep this question in your heart." The 1-meter lady's eyes suddenly showed some pity. "Mr. Gohan, you'll have a lot of troubles in the future." What did the 1-meter sword mean? Gohan faintly sensed that the 1-meter sword seemed to know more than he imagined. "Fleeting time," Lin panted as he arrived at the entrance of Your Name. When he saw his sword mistress chatting happily with Gohan, he was immediately angered. He pushed open the door and barged into the cafe. "My name? Miss Ling, hurry up, enter the data. It'll be 2 hours and 34 minutes in 10 seconds. The 2 staff members standing next to the 1-meter lady heaved a long sigh of relief. Then, they quickly connected to the committee's computer and entered the message that Liunian Ling had found her sword Maiden. Participant Liunian Ling found her sword Maiden's 3-meter sword in 2 hours and 33 minutes. She obtained 9 points. With this prompt, the 6th person to find her sword Maiden was born. The last person, Passerby B, only had 27 minutes left. Only God knew if he could find her cyan rainbow sword. What did you guys talk about? The first thing that Liunian Ling did when she found the 1-meter sword was not to greet her sword Maiden. Instead, she threw herself on the table and interrogated the 1-meter sword aggressively. It was as if she was very afraid that the 1-meter sword would tell Gohan something. "We talked about some things that happened in the past. It brought back a lot of memories. Mr. Gohan is really a person who knows how to chat." The 1-meter sword smiled, stood up and said to Gohan, "The movie is over, and my sword Maiden is here. I should go. See you later, Mr. Gohan." After that, the 1-meter sword took the initiative to pull the confused Liunian Ling out of the cafe. Gohan, who did not get any information, smiled bitterly. He grabbed Ching Pin, who was lying motionless on the table like a plush toy, and left the cafe with Gu Xuanwu. When Gohan returned to the martial arts field, Song Hama was already waiting for Gohan at the intersection. Originally, he was still shopping with Cast Cloud Iron when he was called over by Gohan. Then, Gohan directly handed Gu Xuanwu to Song Hama. After instructing Song Hama not to leave this guy at any time, he returned to the throne. At this time, the 3rd round of the competition was officially over. In the end, Passerby B still could not find his sword Maiden and could only dejectedly get a 0. As a result, Yuzhong University, who had fallen to 2nd place in the 2nd round, rushed back to 1st place with a total score of 93 points. Yenjing College temporarily took 2nd place with a score of 83 points. 3rd place was London College with 79 points. 4th place was Moscow College with 75 points. 5th place was Berlin College with 73 points. 6th place was Buenos Aires College with 62 points. The audience was very dissatisfied with this result. The 4th round was about to begin, but Yenjing City actually fell behind Yuzhong City. This was a great humiliation. If it was not for the fact that the person sitting on the throne was the eldest daughter of the Leonian clan, these angry people would have already started cursing. Forget it, regardless of whether they cursed or not, the fourth round of the competition had begun. Chapter 825. Little girl, what is the relationship between you and Gohan? Song Hama, who was told by Gohan to take care of Gu Xuanwu, looked at Gu Xuanwu with a headache. Beside Song Hama was Cast Cloud Iron, who was even more in a headache. Anyone who was in the middle of a lovey-dovey shopping trip would explode if they were suddenly called to see their child. He is an irresponsible man, Gu Xuanwu said coldly. The irresponsible in Gu Xuanwu's words was naturally irresponsible towards him and his mother. But in Song Hama's ears, it became irresponsible between a man and a woman. After all, Gu Xuanwu looked a little older than Gohan. No one would think that Gu Xuanwu was Gohan's daughter. I didn't expect Gohan to be this kind of person, Cast Cloud Iron said indignantly. Then, she pinched Song Hama's waist and warned him solemnly, if you dare to mess around with little girls, the rest of your life will be over. But what does it have to do with me? Song Hama said bitterly. Uncle Song Hama? What will the fourth round be? Tell me about it. The scene was a little noisy, so Gu Xuanwu didn't hear clearly what the host said. She could only ask Song Hama again. Don't call me uncle. You look older than me. Song Hama smiled bitterly and explained, the fourth round of the competition will be carried out in pairs. Then, they will enter a special dungeon created by Sword Maiden Online and fight as a team. The team that kills the most yuan songs will get the most points, and so on. Sword Lady Online? What is that? Gu Xuanwu asked puzzledly. This was her first time entering human society. Naturally, she had never heard of Sword Lady Online. But in Song Hama's ears, it became inconceivable. There were humans in this world who didn't know about Sword Lady Online? Although she was puzzled, Song Hama still explained Sword Lady Online to Gu Xuanwu. So it's like this. I'm so envious. If only I could enter Sword Lady Online. Gu Xuanwu said to herself. Is it difficult? If you want, you can enter the game through your personal terminal, but the gaming experience is much worse than the gaming helmet, Song Hama said. As soon as Song Hama's voice fell, he discovered that the Gu Xuanwu beside him was completely motionless. F*CK, don't enter the game here. Do you want me to carry you back? Song Hama had seen the black tortoise's state many times. It was clearly in the game's state. This made Song Hama feel very annoyed. It seemed that he wouldn't be able to continue shopping today. It was all that damned Gohan's fault. What kind of person did he throw at him? Seeing the name above his head, Gohan let out a small sigh of relief. Although it was clear in advance that a new character image would be created after entering the game. Moreover, they would not have any contact with the main world of the game and would only appear in the instance dungeon. However, Gohan was still a little worried. If the name of the military governor was exposed at this time, it wouldn't be fun. At this time, Gohan was in a game instance dungeon that was temporarily opened. The environment of the instance dungeon was a huge forest. Around Gohan was a circle of transparent light walls. Outside the light walls was a deep and dark forest. There seemed to be many terrifying existences hidden in the forest. 7 contestants, you have 5 minutes to form a team. Each team cannot exceed 2 people. You can also act alone. The host's voice sounded in the instance dungeon. The competition time is 2 hours. Mouse level Yuan Ko has 1 point. Tiger level Yuan Ko has 3 points. Ghost level Yuan Ko has 10 points. Soul level Yuan Ko has 30 points. Dragon level Yuan Ko has 100 points. Dragon level Yuan Ko has 300 points. Nether level Yuan Ko has 1000 points. Meteor level Yuan Ko has 3000 points. Now, you are free to form a team. Almost at the moment when the announcement was made, everyone started to move. At this time, the relationship between the contestants could be seen. First, Liu Ling was surrounded by 4 people at the same time. Except for Andreevich, almost everyone appeared next to Liu Ling, including Harry Chang-ra, who had tried to get close to Gohan before. He also appeared next to Liu Ling, hoping to form a team with Liu Ling. Sorry. Liu Ling shook her head. Then, she grabbed Passerby B's clothes and took a step back, indicating that she would form a team with Passerby B, who also belonged to Yanjing Academy. This seemed to be a very normal choice. Wasn't it normal to form a team with a classmate from the same academy? But in fact, this was an abnormal choice. According to past experience, the strong would only form a team with the strong, and wouldn't care about the fact that they belonged to the same academy. So, normally, Liu Ling's best choice should be to form a team with Andreevich or Gohan. Even if Andreevich and Gohan didn't take the initiative to look for her, there were still Leslie Dracula and Harry Chang-ra. No matter how one looked at it, they were stronger than the weakest Passerby B. But since Liu Ling had quit, Gohan and Andreevich seemed to be the best people to hug. But unexpectedly, everyone went to Andreevich, and no one came to look for Gohan. Although Gohan didn't care about forming a team with him, it was still a very uncomfortable thing to be ignored like this. In the end, all 3 teams were formed. Liu Ling formed a team with Passerby B. Harry Chang-ra and Leslie Dracula formed a team, Lady and Andreevich formed a team, and Gohan formed a team all by himself. Although Gohan didn't understand it at first, he immediately realized that the reason why these people didn't choose to form a team with him was probably because of his Yuzhong University's ranking on the scoreboard. The points produced by forming a team were shared by the team members, which meant that the number of kills of 2 people in the team was shared by both parties, which was equivalent to having 2 people's kill points. The final points obtained after the competition were divided by 1,000, and the final points would be added to the points obtained before the competition, becoming the overall score of the 4th round. The 4 people in the bottom 4 of the overall individual kill score would be eliminated. If Gohan formed a team and obtained double the kill points, no matter how one looked at it, Gohan's first place would be unbreakable. Only by isolating Gohan and preventing him from sharing the points of his teammates could he possibly surpass Yuzhong University's first place. Let the competition begin. As soon as the host gave the order, everyone rushed out like arrows. They tacitly went in different directions to avoid encountering each other during the battle, which would cause some inexplicable conflicts. Gohan chose the west direction alone. The forest in this dungeon was filled with trees that were more than 20 meters tall. The lush branches and leaves covered the sky tightly, and the hot and bright sunlight became dim when it shone under the trees. The time of the dungeon was set at noon, but the entire forest seemed to be at dusk. The range of vision was less than 20 meters, and beyond that, the situation in the distance could no longer be seen clearly. This gave the lurking Yuan Ko a great opportunity. You have obtained 10 points. Your current total points, 10. Gohan didn't even turn his head. He took out his Juzi sword and slashed behind him. A system notification sounded in his ears, and he obtained 10 points just like that. The one who ambushed Gohan was a spotted leopard. Hiding in the darkness of the tree trunk, it was very confident. It felt that as long as it jumped out at lightning speed and used its sharp claws to gently slash Gohan's neck, it could take away Gohan's life. Unfortunately, it didn't know that Gohan had already sensed its existence the moment it took its first breath. This spotted leopard was only a ghost-grade Yuan Ko. Naturally, it couldn't withstand a single slash from a top-famed sword-grade sword mistress. It was directly slashed in half by the Juzi sword and then absorbed by the dimensional vortex. Although the spotted leopard was dead, its death became a signal. Immediately after the spotted leopard, hundreds of spotted leopards suddenly jumped out from various parts of the forest. All of their sharp claws had one target: Gohan's neck. They wanted to cut open Gohan's neck. There was nothing to go into detail about the battle. not to mention hundreds of spotted leopards. Even if millions of them pounced at him at the same time, Gohan probably wouldn't care. After all, millions of spotted leopards couldn't attack Gohan at the same time. In terms of attack area, at most 6 or 7 spotted leopards could attack Gohan at the same time. This gave Gohan a chance to perform. Every time Gohan's sword flew up and slashed several spotted leopards in half. Then, the dimensional vortex grew larger and larger, continuously absorbing these pitiful spotted leopards' corpses. In less than 10 minutes, hundreds of spotted leopards were all dead, becoming Gohan's points. You have obtained 10 points. Your current total points are 3,250. Gohan stretched his back. He had obtained 3,250 points just like that. The speed wasn't bad. He wondered how many points the others had. According to previous competition practices, this wave of spotted leopards should have been deliberately spawned for the contestants to be at the bottom. That's why the other teams also encountered this wave of spotted leopards. Apart from Liu Nianling, there should still be half of the others left. Gohan guessed. It was impossible for the others to have such a terrifying killing speed as Gohan. So what was the truth? On the eastern battlefield, Leslie Dracula and Harry Chong Rua's team had only killed a little more than 100 spotted leopards. On the other hand, Liu Nianling and Passerby B's team had already killed all the spotted leopards just like Gohan. As for Andreevich and Ladia's team, Ladia stared at Andreevich, who was in a frenzy. Electric arcs constantly flashed around them. Unexpectedly, a spotted leopard turned into a corpse in an instant. Andreevich had actually killed all the spotted leopards by himself. Chapter 8:26. Each contestant didn't know the accumulated points of other contestants, but the audience sitting in the stands and watching the live TV could know the points of other contestants, because a scoreboard had been hung on the TV screen, and the person in first place had 16,272 points. This score was naturally not Gohan's, but Andreevich's. In an hour, he had accumulated almost double the number of points that Gohan had. The person in second place was still not Gohan, but Liu Nianling and Passerby B. This team ranks second with 12,230 points, and the third place was Gohan with 9,565 points. This year's competition is really weird. They actually led our Miss Ling in the Moscow round. An audience member said in disbelief. Obviously, she couldn't accept such a result. After losing to their opponent in the third round, which tested the tacit understanding between the Sword Lady and the Swordswoman, unexpectedly they also lost to the Muscovite in the team competition. It can't be helped, Miss Ling's teammate is too trashy. Another audience member was obviously dissatisfied with Liu Nianling's choice of Passerby B. In the competition just now, Passerby B didn't have any effect at all. His points were less than 1,000, not even a fraction of Miss Ling's points. Yes, in comparison, the Berlin girl is much better. It seems that she also got more than 5,000 points. If we don't talk about the 5,000 points, our Miss Ling is still in first place. The audience immediately echoed. That's right, that's completely the fault of her teammate. Miss Ling is still in first place. All the audience members nodded in agreement, expressing that this was the truth. It wasn't that Miss Ling wasn't strong enough, but that her teammate was too useless. By the way, don't you care about that, Gohan? An audience member suddenly asked. What's there to care about? He's just a piece of trash. In a real battle, he will show his true colors. At most, he will be in third place, the surrounding audience said disdainfully. But did you notice that just now? When the camera swept over that Yuzhong person, he didn't seem to move at all. He doesn't seem to be moving at all. The audience member voiced out the doubt in his heart. He paid a lot of attention to Gohan. Otherwise, he would be able to discover such an important thing when the camera swept over Gohan. Is that so? I didn't notice. The other audience members shook their heads in disdain. He's not worth paying attention to. Look, the camera is on Miss Ling again. Let's cheer for Miss Ling. Is that so? Only third place in total points? At this moment, the unnoticed Gohan was leisurely lying on a rock. There was no one beside him, and no one knew who he was talking to. All right. In fact, only Tomono Kakashi could talk to Gohan at this time. Oh right, I heard that you entered Bilibili's main battle today. Congratulations. Gohan was the first to congratulate Tomono Kakashi. P.S. First of all, congratulations to my beloved Gina-chan for entering this site. Then, I want to clarify that those who don't play in Bilibili can ignore this sentence. It won't affect the plot. What do you mean by main battle? Tomono Kakashi muttered. Don't you want to be in first place? Just let your points slide like this? Don't worry, this is a rare opportunity. Let Chidien and Juzi practice. Especially Chidien, her swordsmanship is terrible. It's not worthy of her powerful attributes, Gohan said with a bitter smile. He was lying there comfortably, while Chidien and Juzi were fighting hard in the forest more than 10 kilometers away. That was why Gohan's points kept rising even though he didn't do anything. In fact, this was the original fighting style of a sword wielder. The sword wielder would hide behind the sword wielder and let the sword wielder fight. However, the sword wielder must not be too far away from the sword wielder. Otherwise, if the sword wielder couldn't rush back in time, the sword wielder would be torn into pieces by Yuan Ko. Only a sword wielder could be so willful as to lie there and let the sword wielder fight more than 10 kilometers away like Gohan did. This was because only a sword wielder could lift a sword wielder and fight by himself without revealing any sword marks. Although the boulder that Gohan was lying on was clean, not a single drop of blood could be seen. In fact, there were already at least 50 to 60 Yuenko who had died here, and they were all instantly killed by Gohan's heavenly sword. The reason why he let Juzi and Chidien fight so far away was to train Chidien's swordsmanship. When Chidien was King Yu, due to the lack of consciousness fragments, King Yu completely forgot his swordsmanship. Only after being trained by Gohan for a while did he recover some of his swordsmanship memory. However, at that time, Gohan wasn't worried about King Yu's swordsmanship. This was because once King Yu fused with his original body, King Yu would be able to recover all of his swordsmanship. It must be known that King Yu's swordsmanship was one of the best among all the famous sword wielder. However, King Yu became Chidien, so there was no sword wielder for him to fuse with. Chidien was like a newborn child who could only accumulate his swordsmanship bit by bit. At that moment, what Chidien needed the most was a large number of Yuan Ko for Chidien to practice with. However, finding a large number of Yuan Ko for Chidien to practice with was easier said than done. It was naturally impossible in real life. Gohan couldn't leave Yanjing City for the time being, so he could only rely on the game. Coincidentally, he encountered a trial to kill Yuan Ko, so Gohan naturally thought of letting Chidien train himself. The reason why Gohan was talking to Tomono Kakashi was because Gohan was asking Tomono Kakashi to do him a favor. Because Gohan knew that all the matches were being broadcasted to the audience in front of the TV. However, due to technical issues, the broadcasting was handled by Tomono Kakashi, the game's core AI. In other words, what the audience could see depended on the camera under Tomono Kakashi's control. Therefore, Gohan secretly begged Tomono Kakashi to reduce the number of scenes related to him and increase the number of scenes related to the others. Anyway, the people of Yanjing loved watching their Liunian Ling fight, so they naturally weren't curious about the hated Yuzhong guy. This wasn't a difficult task for Tomono Kakashi, so she easily accomplished it. Therefore, in the hour-long battle, Gohan's scenes were only shown for less than 3 minutes. However, just as Gohan predicted, the audience in Yanjing City didn't notice anything strange. Another hour! Gohan looked at the difference in points and smiled at Tomono Kakashi. It won't be a problem to catch up in an hour. An hour's time? After an hour, the difference between you and the first place will increase to about 18,000 points. Are you sure you can catch up to 18,000 points in an hour? Tomono Kakaze asked with uncertainty. Oh right, don't expect me to open the back door for you. I can't change Yuan-Ko's attribute. Otherwise, Xian will lock me up immediately. I don't need you to help me change Yuan-Ko's attribute. That isn't my style, Gohans. All I need is for you to tell me which area has the highest concentration of high-ranking generals. A meteor rank Yuan bandit is worth 3,000 points. As long as I kill 6 meteor rank Yuan bandits, won't my 18,000 points catch up? That's true, if you have your new Blade Master. Tomono Kakaze didn't continue. Thinking about the new famed sword Blade Master Chidien that Gohan obtained, Tomono Kakaze couldn't help but feel a chill. After discovering the Juzi sword, Tomono Kakaze was shocked by its attribute. Then, she started to wonder who should be first between the Juzi sword and the 3-foot sword. But now, Tomono Kakaze didn't have to wonder anymore. Ever since the Chidien sword appeared, the first place was indisputably on the head of the Chidien sword. Chidien sword. Material: Emperor Alu origin. Innate unknown unique realm. Famed sword grade. Rank 9 sword? Characteristic 1. The Chidien sword has the ability to continue to upgrade itself. After meeting certain conditions, it can upgrade to Emperor Sword Blade Master. Characteristic 2. The Chidien sword can only be owned by the sword wielder, military governor. Others can't synchronize with the Chidien sword. Awakening, awakened. Form, sword form. Sword wielder, military governor. Deep sword mark, not deep. Damage, Blade Master Form 2. 85/Sword Form 3. 85 Defense, Blade Master Form 2. 88/Sword Form 2. 88 Agility, Blade Master Form 0. 91/Sword Form 1. 41 Protective Shield Resetting Time, 600 seconds. Durability, 100% synchronization and coordination sword element requirement, 10,000 synchronization and coordination time, 10 minute. Initial sword mark engraving. After the initial engraving of the sword mark, the sword wielder's sword element points will be increased by 10,000 points. Sword mark contract. After synchronization, the Chidien sword will have the ability to trigger the dimensional vortex. As long as it attacks the opponent's dimensional energy node, it can open the dimensional vortex and send the opponent back into the dimensional vortex. Basic skill, node of all. After use, the Chidien sword will have the ability to see the opponent's dimensional energy node. Lasts for 20 seconds. Cooldown of 1 minute. Passive skill, node of all. Attacks have a chance to rejuvenate the opponent, causing the opponent to return to a child state. The chance depends on the opponent's ability, ranging from 1% to 90%. Lasts for 10 seconds. Advanced skill, Genesis of all. Copies all life forms within a 100-meter radius. The copied life forms will have different percentages of Chidien's strength. Cooldown of 5 minutes. Ultimate skill, Chidien God. After use, the Chidien sword will have the ability to become a god. It can deify the target within the range and increase one of its attributes by 100 times. Lasts for 15 seconds. Cooldown of 10 minutes. Sword mark restraint. Twin Juzi. When fighting with the Juzi sword or under the same sword wielder, both sides' attributes will be increased by 100%. Turn enemy into friend. When fighting with the past water sword or under the same sword wielder, all of the enemy's attributes will be decreased by 100%. Double Emperors in the air. After the Chidien sword evolved into an Emperor sword, it will be unsealed. When wielding the Xianyuan sword, both sides' skills will be increased by 400%. Chapter 8:27. To be honest, when Gohan saw the attributes of Chidien's sword, his worldview was almost overturned. First of all, the three basic attributes of Qidian's sword were 2 times higher than Juzi's sword, the defense was exactly the same as Juzi's sword, and the agility was also 2 times higher than Juzi's sword. If Juzi's sword's 3 dimensions were still in the lower middle range among the spiritual sword maidens, then Qidian's sword's 3 dimensions were already among the best among the spiritual sword maidens. And the ability of the dimensional vortex that appeared in the previous battle was also confirmed. Just as Gohan guessed, as long as he could find the opponent's dimensional energy node, and then hit this node, then Qidian's sword could directly open the dimensional vortex and send this guy back to his original dimension. Unlike other skills of Qidian's sword that required probability to be triggered, the skill brought by this sword mark contract was 100% triggering. As long as the triggering conditions could be met, then even if it was a primeval level 2 Yuan Ko, he would probably be sent back by Qidian's sword. This was just an inference based on the attributes in the game. As for the truth, it still needed to be proven in a real battle. However, before Gohan became an immortal sword-level sword wielder, he did not have the guts to fight with a primeval level 2 Yuan Ko. As for the 4 skills of Qidian's sword, each was stronger than the other. Not to mention the basic skill, Node of all things, this was the first basic skill that Gohan had seen that existed to assist in the sword mark contract. With this skill, the node of the dimensional energy no longer needed to be perceived by his own feelings, but could be seen directly with his own eyes, which greatly increased the usability of Qidian's sword mark contract. The passive skill, starting of all things, had a chance of returning the opponent to a childhood state. Thinking about a powerful primeval level Yuan Ko suddenly becoming a fragile baby, it was a very terrifying thing to think about. The advanced skill, starting of all things. He didn't know if this skill could copy the primeval level Yuan Ko. If it could, then Qidian's sword was really heaven-defying. As for the last ultimate skill, it could increase the effect of a skill of a friendly target by 100 times. Not to mention others, if it could be improved on Qidian's sword's own advanced skill. Did it mean that he could copy 100 primeval level Yuan Ko? The final sword Scar Fetters. This was probably the only sword Scar Fetters that could be activated among all of Gohan's sword maidens. Gohan's other sword maidens' sword scars had nothing to do with Gohan. Only the starting point sword seemed to be because it was a sword maiden that Gohan had personally created, so the target of the sword mark was actually the sword maiden that Gohan already had. For example, when Qidian and Juzi fought together, both of their attributes increased by 100% at the same time. In terms of attributes, they had truly reached the strength of a spirit sword-level sword wielder. Of course, because Gohan's sword essence was still about half as strong as the lowest level spirit sword-level sword wielder, when it came to a real battle, there was still a gap between him and the sword lady of the spirit sword level on paper. However, all of the above points added together could not compare to the starting point. The peculiarity of its characteristic. First of all, there were these 2 question marks. It seemed that even Tomono Kakashi could not figure out the attributes of Qidian's sword, so she could only use these 2 question marks to express it. According to the information that Gohan had personally asked Tomono Kakashi suspected that Qidian might belong to a brand new kendo that had never been discovered by humans. Therefore, she could not name this kendo at all. However, Tomono Kakashi suggested to Gohan to let Gohan apply to the Sword Committee for a more detailed appraisal of Qidian's sword, so that they could get the attributes of Qidian's sword more accurately. In this regard, Gohan expressed a very clear refusal, and sincerely begged Tomono Kakashi to keep the attributes of Qidian's sword's appraisal strictly confidential, and not to upload them to the Sword Committee. In this regard, Tomono Kakashi could only say very apologetically that every year, the people in the management office would forcibly extract all the data in the game for testing, so at most 1 year later, Qidian's sword's attributes would be exposed. And once Qidian's sword's attributes were exposed, The fact that Tomono Kakaze deliberately concealed Chidien's sword's attributes would also be exposed, and then Tomono Kakaze would be in a very dangerous state. But fortunately, because the appraisal of Chidien's sword was done in this temporarily established dungeon, Tomono Kakaze could only apologize. This temporarily established dungeon was completely constructed by Tomono Kakaze, and Tomono Kakaze had 100% power here. When the dungeon ended, Tomono Kakaze would also clear all the data of this dungeon to zero. As long as Tomono Kakaze fused Chidien's sword's data with the dungeon's data and cleared it together, no one would suspect anything. But this was only limited to this temporarily established dungeon. Tomono Kakaze very clearly warned Gohan that he must not allow Chidien's sword to officially enter the world of Sword Maiden Online, or else Tomono Kakaze would have to report the data of Chidien's sword committee to the Sword Committee. After listening to Tomono Kakaze's words, Gohan felt very lucky that he did not enter the game after returning to Yenjing City. But to be honest, if it wasn't for Jiansu Oral Solution and I Ching's hidden foreshadowing, then Sword Maiden Online really wouldn't be that attractive to Gohan, unlike at the beginning, when it was the game that brought new hope to Gohan. Back to the issue of the inexplicable characteristics of Chidien's sword, other than the two question marks, Chidien's sword actually had two sword principal characteristics. This was a special honor that only Emperor swords and Fairy swords could have, because only Emperor swords and Fairy swords could have two sword principal characteristics. If there were other sword maidens who were the same as Chidien in terms of dual characteristics, then the specific contents of these two characteristics were unparalleled in the world and could only be found in Chidien. First of the characteristics, Chidien's sword actually had the ability to evolve from a famous sword-level sword maiden to an Emperor sword-level sword maiden. Just by thinking about it, one would know that this was a very terrifying thing. This was because Chidien's sword occupied Gohan's famous sword-level sword mark. If after Gohan became an Emperor sword-level sword wielder, Chidien's sword would evolve into an Emperor sword-level sword maiden. Wouldn't that mean that Gohan could have two Emperor sword-level sword maidens at the same time? This could be seen from the third sword scar at the starting point. The sword scar fetters, which was called Twin Emperors in the Sky, was written strangely. Normally, sword scar fetters would say, when fighting with a certain sword lady or when fighting with the same sword wielder, a certain attribute would be increased. This meant that as long as the other sword wielder who was fighting with the sword wielder had a sword maiden that was required for the sword mark fetter, then the sword mark fetter would also be successful. However, the attribute of double emperors in the sky was written like this. This sword mark fetter could only be triggered when it belonged to the same sword wielder as the Xianyuan sword. This meant that in order to trigger this fetter, Gohan had to have the Emperor sword-level Xianyuan sword himself. Moreover, the prerequisite was that Chidien's sword had to evolve into an Emperor sword-level sword maiden. This clearly meant that Gohan could have the Emperor sword form Chidien's sword and the Xianyuan sword at the same time. Gohan could indeed become a man who could have two Emperor sword-level swords at the same time. In this way, apart from Kenzu, there was probably no other Emperor sword-level power that could suppress Gohan. And once Gohan grew into an Emperor sword-level sword wielder, all of Yuan Ko's nightmares would appear, and the most powerful period of mankind would also come. From this point of view, even if the world's #1 sword maiden was placed on Chidien's sword's head, it was also a matter of course. If the first characteristic was the characteristic that made Chidien's sword the world's #1 sword maiden, then the second characteristic of Chidien's sword was the characteristic that made Chidien's sword fall into the mortal world. Only Gohan could synchronize and coordinate it. When Gohan was alive, Chidien's sword was the world's #1 sword maiden. However, once Gohan ascended, Chidien's sword would probably become the world's most expensive piece of trash, and could only be placed in the Gohan Jiendi Museum for future generations to admire. What should I do? If I die, you'll fall into a deep sleep forever. An hour ago, after Gohan had seen Chi-Dian's sword's attributes clearly, he had asked Chi-Dian's sword this question. "I'll ascend with you. If God doesn't allow it, then I'll go by myself," was Chi-Dian's sword's answer, and the determination it displayed made Gohan's heart tremble. From what Chi-Dian's sword had said, if he was going to die, then she would break herself and follow Gohan. Why bother? The heaven-reliant sword in Gohan's hand stabbed to the left, and an assassin wearing black night clothes with a dagger in his hand suddenly appeared in the empty space. This assassin was Yuan Ko's assassin, organized by the old man in the mountain. He used invisibility to launch a sneak attack on the swordsman. Unfortunately, his footsteps were not light enough, and Gohan saw through his trick and killed him with a single slash. After killing the assassin, Gohan looked at the time again. There was only 1 hour and 10 minutes left until the end of the competition. It's time to meet up with Chi-Dian's sword and the others. Gohan climbed up from the rock and slowly walked toward the depths of the forest where Chi-Dian's sword and Juzi were. All right, the competition will end in an hour. Now, our Miss Ling is far ahead and has basically secured her victory. Let us congratulate Miss Ling. In the live broadcast of the television station, the host no longer cared about being impartial and objective. He directly started to celebrate Liu Ling's victory. This was because Liu Ling, who had been trailing behind Andreevich an hour ago, had completely overtaken Andreevich. Her points had reached a terrifying 58,650 points, and she was almost 18,000 points ahead of Andreevich. The reason for this was that Liu Ling, who had been using the 3-foot sword normally in the previous hour, had finally used the 100 million sword technique when she was surrounded by a large group of Nether Yuan Ko. In just 5 minutes, she had killed all the Nether Yuan Ko, and her points had increased by 25,000. She had overtaken Andreevich. However, the host did not seem to notice that the points of Gohan, who was in 3rd place, suddenly jumped from his original 19,840 points to 22,840 points, increasing by 3,000 points in one go. Chapter 828. Chi-Dian has improved a lot. When Gohan rushed to the battlefield where Juzi and Chi-Dian were fighting, he was pleasantly surprised to find that Chi-Dian's swordsmanship had improved significantly. Although it had been trained by Gohan, it had to be admitted that Chi-Dian's swordsmanship was still a little rigid. It was inflexible and didn't have its own comprehension. To put it simply, Gohan taught Chi-Dian how to practice, and Chi-Dian rarely added his own ideas. However, at that moment, Gohan could see many things that belonged to Chi-Dian from its swordsmanship. This meant that Chi-Dian was improving, and the improvement was huge. It was like sitting in an F1 car. In just 2 hours, Chi-Dian had made progress that was equivalent to 3 months of Gohan's. Could it be that after changing bodies, Chi-Dian's swordsmanship talent improved as well? Gohan guessed inwardly. Or perhaps it's because of its soul. Chi-Dian was only a consciousness fragment previously, and it had deliberately concealed all memories related to swordsmanship. Therefore, it's reasonable that its swordsmanship cultivation speed wasn't fast. But now that Chi-Dian's soul has been completely restored, its swordsman-related talent has returned? While Gohan was thinking about this, Chi-Dian had already killed a dragon-grade Yuan Ko. This dragon-level Yuan bandit was considered an above-average opponent among all the dragon-level Yuan bandit. An ordinary famous sword-level swordmistress would need around 10 minutes to kill this dragon-level Yuan bandit if their attributes were not countered. But now, Chi-Dian had only used 5 sword strikes to kill his opponent. However, there were still some shortcomings. Gohan's order was for Chi-Dian to directly attack the opponent's dimensional node as much as possible. That way, it could directly open a dimensional vortex and send the opponent home with 1 strike. Unfortunately, the dimensional node was too small. The dragon-grade Yuan Ko's dimensional node was only about the size of a fingernail. Even if Yuan Ko stood there motionlessly, it would still be difficult for him to attack with his sword in one go. Not to mention that Yuan Ko was moving at a high speed. Although Yuan Ko's talent was amazing, it would still take a certain amount of time to reach this level. Juzi Qidian, stop! There was still an hour left, and Gohan did not dare to continue wasting time. He began to order Juzi and Qidian to return to the sword, and then he took action himself to catch up with the points he was lagging behind. Yes, master. Juzi once again displayed her cleverness and obedience. Even though she was fighting against a Yuan Ko, after receiving Gohan's order, Juzi immediately stopped swinging her sword and stood motionless. She didn't care even if Yuan Ko attacked her several times for no reason. Come back! With a wave of Gohan's hand, Juzi turned into a stream of light and returned to his hand. Yuan Ko, who was attacking Juzi, realized that Juzi had suddenly disappeared and immediately pounced at Gohan angrily. Gohan casually swung his sword and sent Yuan Ko back into the dimensional vortex. Compared to Juzi's cleverness, Qidian continued the unique characteristics of the King of Chu, which was disobedience. She had always been unwilling to carry out Gohan's orders resolutely. Even if she was willing to carry it out, she would delay it for a while before carrying it out. Otherwise, how could she show that she was Gohan's most important sword maiden? This time, Qidian probably really didn't want to carry out Gohan's orders, or it could be said that she wanted to carry out Gohan's orders too much. No. I must hit Yuan Ko's node. This is also your order, isn't it? Qidian's stubborn temper flared up again. She expressed that she must hit the opponent's node once and send him back to his home through the dimensional vortex. I'll only give you 5 minutes. If you can't do it in 5 minutes, I'll force you to return to your sword. It had to be said that Gohan's personality had indeed changed a lot. Otherwise, why would he give Qidian 5 minutes and force her to return to her sword? Qidian didn't say anything and started shooting out flames. Looking at the unintelligent Yuan Ko, he couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. It was as if he wasn't Yuan Ko and Qidian was the real Yuan Ko. However, there was a saying in this world, more haste, less speed. The more Qidian wanted to do something, the worse it got. Although Qidian used more strength to kill, her swordsmanship lost its order. Not only did she not hit the enemy's node, her killing efficiency decreased and was not even as efficient as before. Damn it! Qidian gritted her teeth and cut off the head of a flood dragon Yuan Ko beside her. At this moment, a crazy roar came from the forest in the distance. Then, a dinosaur that was as tall as a 3-story building jumped out. The most eye-catching thing about this dinosaur was its huge head and terrifyingly sharp teeth. The strong muscles on both sides of its lips proved that this dinosaur had an amazing bite force. At the same time, it had a pair of extremely powerful tails. Along the way, Gohan saw with his own eyes that 5 to 6 trees were directly snapped in half by its tail. If one was hit by this tail, one's bones would probably be crushed in an instant. However, this dinosaur walked on 2 feet. Although it had a pair of forelimbs, they were very small. They were only the size of an adult's arm. It didn't seem to have any combat power. It seemed to be just balancing its body's center of gravity. This is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Gohan recognized Yuan Ko's information. This was a Tyrannosaurus Rex that belonged to the Western Beast Camp. Although Tyrannosaurus Rex was classified as a Western Beast Camp, according to the information found in some dinosaur museums, Tyrannosaurus Rex actually had nothing to do with Western Beast Camp. The Tyrannosaurus Rex actually had nothing to do with Western magical beasts, nor was it something that existed in people's imagination. Rather, it was a prehistoric creature native to Earth. Putting them in the Western camp was just a convenient way for humans to put them there. There was a period of time when a large number of Yuan Ko dinosaurs appeared on Earth. Unfortunately, these dinosaurs didn't belong to Yuan Ko forces and were not very smart, so they were quickly killed by humans and other Yuan Ko dinosaurs. It was said that only the Wulong region of Sichuan still had a certain number of dinosaurs. Dinosaur Yuan Ko dinosaurs could no longer be found in other places. The most powerful dinosaurs could reach the level of U-level Yuan Ko, and this Tyrannosaurus rex belonged to the meteor-level Yuan Ko, which was second only to the U-level Yuan Ko. After being strengthened by dimensional energy, the Tyrannosaurus rex's skin had a powerful defensive ability comparable to that of an armored protective steel plate. At the same time, its bite force reached a terrifying 1,000 tons. It could easily bite a 10-meter-thick steel bar into two pieces. Therefore, the personal terminal's advice to the sword holder clearly stated that they must be absolutely careful of the Tyrannosaurus rex's mouth. Because once bitten, even the personal shield of a spirit sword maiden would shatter in an instant, let alone a fragile human body. Just in time. Seeing the Tyrannosaurus rex appear, Qidian's eyes showed a surprised expression. Because compared to other Yuan Ko dinosaurs, the Tyrannosaurus rex's body was larger, so its dimensional node was also larger. The other Yuan Ko's node was 1/10 of a fingernail, but the Tyrannosaurus rex's node was 2 fingernails. This made Qidian full of confidence that it could hit this node. Therefore, Qidian rushed towards the Tyrannosaurus rex. King Yu, come back. This Tyrannosaurus rex is not something you can deal with. In a moment of desperation, Gohan actually shouted the name of the former King Yu. However, what Gohan didn't expect was that the two words King Yu seemed to evoke Qidian's dissatisfaction, so she rushed forward even more. I see it. Qidian tightened its grip on the Qidian sword and directly stabbed at the Tyrannosaurus rex's lower jaw, because the Tyrannosaurus rex's dimensional node was at the lower jaw. This was a very good position to attack, because it was at the very front of the Tyrannosaurus rex. It was not hidden under its belly, nor was it hidden on the Tyrannosaurus rex's back. Therefore, Qidian could accurately attack this node from a very good angle without even needing to turn. But at the same time, this also brought about a huge risk. In Qidian's eyes, the Tyrannosaurus rex's node was right in front of it, and it was an easy target. In the Tyrannosaurus rex's eyes, this human seemed to be out of her mind. She actually rushed towards its mouth. As long as it opened its mouth, it would easily bite Qidian into its mouth, and then use its amazing bite force to tear the other party into pieces. That was what the Tyrannosaurus rex thought and did. In terms of distance, because the Qidian sword had a certain length, as long as Qidian could attack the Tyrannosaurus rex's node immediately, the Tyrannosaurus rex's dimensional vortex would be opened, and it would be useless for the Tyrannosaurus rex to bite Qidian. Therefore, Qidian still had a chance of winning as long as the first weapon could hit the 2-fingernail-sized node. But unfortunately, at the most critical moment, Qidian's hand trembled slightly. This slight tremble was usually not a big deal, and it would only break 2 cups in the sky. But at this critical moment of life and death, this tremble brought about a huge change. The tip of the Qidian sword brushed past the Tyrannosaurus rex's node. When Qidian was ready to pull back and stab again, she already had no chance. The Tyrannosaurus rex opened its bloody mouth and instantly bit the waist of Qidian, who didn't dodge at all, and held her whole body in its mouth. Then, the Tyrannosaurus rex's upper and lower jaws exerted force at the same time, and Qidian's seemingly indestructible personal shield was shattered in just a moment. The information on the personal terminal clearly stated that the Tyrannosaurus rex's bite force should never be underestimated. That was a power that even a spiritual sword-level sword maiden's personal shield couldn't resist. Although the Qidian sword's protection was the same as a normal spiritual sword-level sword maiden, and because it fought together with Juzi, all its attributes were increased by 100%. But the problem was that Gohan's sword essence was less than half of a spiritual sword-level sword maiden's. In this way, the two offset each other, and Qidian's personal shield at this time was just a normal spiritual sword-level sword maiden's personal shield. Then the ending was obvious. The first bite, Chidian's personal shield was directly shattered. The second bite, Chidian's body would probably be directly bitten to pieces. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.